Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is part 9 of What If Naruto Was in Bleach and Got Harem with Yoruichi. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and also go and support the author, link in description. Naruto and his contingent had returned late in the evening, and due to the terms of his bet with 2nd Division Captain and Executive of the Onmitsukido, Soi Fan, Naruto was not around for debriefing. And by debriefing it would have been more akin to Yoruichi grilling Naruto on what had happened and why he had come back with not 1, not 2, not even 3, but 4 more Arankar. What the hell was this place? A rent-free boarding house. Thus when morning came and Yoruichi found her way downstairs where she saw Naruto sitting and eating a bowl of ramen across from Gaara, she decided to get to the bottom of things right then. Walking over to them both, she saw Naruto wearing a school uniform and that the quiet red-haired Arankar she had been introduced to last night was wearing gray jeans and a short-sleeved burgundy shirt. As he watched Naruto eat, some things just never change, he said to Yoruichi as she walked in amid Naruto's ravenous decimation of his morning treat. Yoruichi sat down between the two of them and crossed her legs as she waited for Naruto to finish, which took about 12 more seconds after she sat down, broth and all. She raised an eyebrow as she saw him wipe his mouth of any leftover residue from his meal. So did you just hold your breath for the minute plus that I saw you eating for, or what? Actually never mind. I just want to know why you brought back so many extras with you. Naruto blinked. The only one I meant to bring back with me was Gaara. Speaking of the others, what did you do with them after I left with Soi Fan last night for our bet? Yoruichi sighed and shook her head, waving her ponytail back and forth. Well, telling them I was a Shinigami and then telling them to come with me didn't play out too well, so I left them down in the training field. They should be fine down there for one night, especially if they don't want to leave. She then pointed over at Gaara. Is he an Ikigai? Naruto nodded. What, did you get up extra early and go get him one? Naruto scoffed. Get up early? Gaara never slept. He's an insomniac. I am not an insomniac, Naruto. Gaara said in his dry tone that Yoruichi figured she would have to get accustomed to as his regular voice. That left me once I reached the grave. I was just asleep for thousands of years. Do you really think that the first thing that I want to do after waking up is sleep again? Good point. Naruto said, but still, you didn't have to keep me awake with you just because you didn't want to sleep. I wanted to dream my sweet dreams, damn it. I had a good night last night, he said with a rather stupid grin on his face. Yoruichi smirked over at him before resting her chin on her hand. So did you have a good time with my little bee Naruto? Naruto chuckled and leaned back in his chair. It took a good 2 hours to get her to loosen up, but after that I think I was able to get her to enjoy herself. She's way nicer to me when she knows that nobody else is watching us. I knew you could get her to like you, Yoruichi insisted, grabbing a hold of Naruto's cheek. Naruto let her pull on his cheek for a second before whipping his head around to get her off, still smiling. What are you talking about? I always knew I'd get on Joubaki's good side. Before or after she tried to chase you across the Soul Society and stab you? Yoruichi quipped in enjoyment. After, Naruto said, not rising to the joke. Ah. Yoruichi stood up and walked behind Naruto, wrapping her arms around his neck and hugging the back of his head against her chest tightly. It's so cute. My big high school boy on his first big date the day before the school year starts. Even Gaara had an amused look on his face at the scene in Yoruichi's dialogue. Naruto's face didn't hold any embarrassment or emotion over Yoruichi's teasing as she continued to hug his head. This doesn't bother me at all. I just want to know one thing and I want you to answer me honestly, Yoruichi-chan. Does that make you hot? Because if it does, I can leave a clone for you to play with and everything. He smirked when she stopped holding onto his head and looked over at Gaara. You see, Gaara? That's how you get a girl to stop teasing you. Tease her harder right back. Gaara nodded. I see. Well, that's good to know. Naruto then stood up and stood in front of Gaara looking down at him expectantly. What? Don't. What? Me? Naruto said to Gaara with an evil grin on his face. You don't know the first thing about living in this time. And what better place to throw you into the deep end of the pool, so to speak, than to make you go to school to suffer like I'll suffer. I enrolled you this morning while Urahara was giving you your Gigai. He reached down to grab Gaara when a wave of sand blocked his hand. You can still do that in your Gigai. Cool. The sand then grabbed a hold of his entire arm. Wait, I mean not cool. Not cool Gaara. Yes cool. Gaara deadpanned as he made his sand throw Naruto across the table, sending his empty ramen bowl flying along with him into the kitchen. You see Yoruichi-san, that's how you get Naruto to leave you alone. Just throw him around a bit. I already knew that Gaara. Yoruichi said with a smile, thank you though. But Naruto is right, you should go to school. He can cover for you, but you really do need to know how this world works if you're going to live here and work with us. Naruto stomped back out of the kitchen and stopped in front of Gaara, staring at him with a twitching eye. Rule number 1, I'm number 1. Rule number 2, don't do that shit in public, ever, seriously. If someone goes to touch you and an arm of sand bitch slaps them across the face, that will bring up a lot of explaining that I don't want to have to deal with BSing my way out of. No jutsu or sand in public. Gaara looked over at Yoruichi and got a nod from her, telling him that Naruto was telling the truth. Fine then. No jutsu or sand in public. And I will go with you to this school, even though I already had to go through the academy in our time. I know right. Naruto added on with a sigh in full agreement before waving his hand dismissively. Go get changed into the uniform in your room so we can get the hell out of here. I've got too much stuff to do today to be late. Gaara nodded and headed upstairs to the room gifted to him by Yoruichi the previous night, leaving Naruto and Yoruichi alone. Naruto turned around to head off and get more ramen when he felt Yoruichi grab a hold of his arm, getting him to look at her. She looked right back up at him with a gleam in her golden eyes. Would you leave a clone like you suggested? Naruto stared at her for a moment before looking up at the ceiling as if he could see through to Gaara's room. He looked down back at her with a similar spark in his eye. School starts in 45 minutes, I can get Gaara there in 5. Fuck making a clone, I'll do it myself. He said, getting a grin out of Yoruichi as he picked her up and ran upstairs. XXX. 1 hour later, Karakura High School. Naruto and Gaara walked through the halls both dressed in school uniforms. Gaara just stared at Naruto shaking his head while Naruto looked straight ahead with a massive grin on his face. You are a complete deviant. Gaara commented. It wasn't like he didn't hear anything, he was on the same damn floor of the massive building that they were. Yoruichi was quite vocal in her enjoyment of Naruto's ministrations, so much so that they were now late. Never said I wasn't. Naruto replied, his smile never leaving his face. Kami, I love that woman. My sweet kitty, he said, eyes glassing over in reminiscence before Gaara snapped his fingers in front of his face. I'm alright. No you weren't. Gaara said, taking in the sights of the school but making sure he didn't look too confused. It wasn't a big deal anyway. Things didn't seem that different inside of school from the academy he went to in his childhood. Outside was completely different though, but he'd have time to explore that later. I need you to keep me from slipping up and blowing my cover on the first day, so shape up. Hey, I'm your boss now, Kazekage-sama. Naruto chimed in gleefully, popping Gaara in the shoulder with a good-natured shot, so you can't tell me to do anything now. As a matter of fact I have seniority over you, so listen to your senpai like a good little kahai. Gaara just turned his seafoam green eyes onto Naruto and stared at him for long enough to let Naruto remember how much Gaara could unnerve him back in the day. Was it wrong to admit that he actually missed that? I will eat your unhappiness. Naruto simply turned his head back forward and led Gaara down the hall before stopping at their homeroom. Alright, here we go. Just be cool and everything should be all good. I've got your back, Gaara. Why would you need to have my back? Gaara asked, keeping Naruto from reaching for the door. Naruto gave him a dry look and opened his mouth to speak before shaking his head, thinking better of the whole thing and just thinking about letting Gaara wing it to show him how screwed he would be without help. With this in mind, Naruto slid the door open and walked into the class. The teacher from last year, Miss Ochi, looked at Naruto and smiled seeing him again. Uzumaki-san. That actually surprised him. He only showed up for 1 day right at the end of the year and he didn't leave that much of an impression to expect anyone in that class to remember who he was. Well, except for Ichigo and the others, but that was for a completely different reason. I saw that you were on my class roster for this year. Hopefully we'll be seeing more of you. Naruto nodded and walked in with a grin. Yeah, sorry I'm late, I just had to bring someone else to class. He pointed behind him at Gaara, who was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed. Introduce yourself already. Gaara rolled his eyes but walked in and stood at the front of the class anyway. My name is Gaara. And he left it at that. Everyone looked at him expecting him to continue, but he did no such thing. Miss Ochi had his full name in her class roster and that was what it was, so she didn't push him to make him say any more than that. Smooth, Naruto said, palming his face before grabbing Gaara's arm. I'll stick with him to make sure he gets the way things work. He offered, as he grabbed Gaara and dragged him to a seat very close to Ichigo, Orihime, Chad, Ryu, and Tatsuki. What's up you guys? Naruto asked as he got Gaara to sit and found his own seat. Ichigo looked at Naruto with wide eyes and pointed at him. Why are you here? Naruto looked around and noticed a few of the other students looking at him. Well Ichigo, this place is called school. School is a place where guys my age have to go or random cops will grab us and throw us in here or in jail for being delinquents. Ichigo was about to exclaim that he didn't mean that version of why he was there, he wanted the real reason. Before he could say anything however, Ryu cut in, show some tact Kurosaki. Do you really expect him to tell you here? At least wait until later to ask, otherwise all you're going to get are smart-ass answers. Exactly. Naruto said in conjunction with Ryu's defense of him. I'll tell you later, so just chill out and wait, and meet Gaara. He said, pointing over at Gaara. He works with me now, so play nice. Ichigo looked at Gaara and blinked for a moment before extending his hand. Hi. I'm Kurosaki Ichigo. Gaara wordlessly took his hand and shook it. So, what's with the rings around his eyes? Ichigo asked bluntly. Ryu glared at Ichigo. Are you always going to be a rude bastard to everyone you meet? Ryu said to him angrily. Naruto had pretty much earned his trust and proved himself to be far more than capable where he was concerned. Yeah, he was kind of an airhead, but if he could act like that and survive, then more power to him. Any friend of Naruto had to be a good enough person to at least allow a chance to trust. It's nice to meet you, Gaara-san. Gaara nodded but remained silent, choosing to follow Naruto's lead as he seemed to know these people. Naruto turned forward in his seat. Look, we can talk about this later. Right now introduce yourselves to Gaara. I'm going to sleep. He said, dropping his head on his desk and quickly finding himself asleep right before class even began in earnest, getting sweet drops from everyone that knew him. XXX. Meanwhile, Naruto's base. Yoruichi sat in the room provided to Soifon for the duration of her stay, kicking her legs off of the edge of the bed with a knowing grin on her face. So how was your night? She saw Soifon stiffen, who had been preparing to head back to the Soul Society later with her current mission complete. Did you enjoy yourself? If Soifon hadn't, she had at least managed to exhaust herself since earlier that morning she didn't stir during Yoruichi and Naruto's activities. Don't try the ignorant thing. I know Naruto took you out last night. Soifon sighed and turned towards her mentor. Fine Yoruichi-sama, yes. Uzumaki took me out last night and no, it wasn't terrible. She then grumbled a further response. Why does it matter anyway? Because you like him, that's why. Yoruichi said, inspecting her nails and missing the slack-jawed look from the Shinigami captain. He knows you do too. Kind of like with me. He made me show him before he really tried anything. I don't like Uzumaki. Soifon insisted. I hate that person. How in the world could you say that I feel anything for him? Yoruichi's eyes raised back up, full of mirth as she explained her reasoning. Because he actually treats you like a woman, even though you act like you don't want him to. You know you love the fact that he wants to spend time with you. Yoruichi hopped off of the bed and grabbed Soifon by her chin to look into her eyes. It's all over your face. Don't lie to me, hate is the very last thing you feel for him. Why are you trying to be so insistent about this, Yoruichi-sama? Soifon asked her, turning her eyes away. Yoruichi frowned and let go of Soifon's chin. Because I don't like hearing you lie to me and yourself like that. She walked towards the door stretching her arms out. The sooner you admit to yourself that you wouldn't mind hooking up with Naruto, the easier it will be. Smirking back at Soifon, she shut the door and left her alone in her room once more. Soifon huffed and sat down on the bed, taking a break from preparing to leave to lay herself down for a bit. Why is Yoruichi-sama trying to tease me about Uzumaki? It's ridiculous. Uzumaki makes me sick. She then let out a sigh and shut her eyes, smashing the back of her head once on the bed and frowning. XXX. Karakura High School. Naruto and Gaara went to the roof of the school once the end of the day rolled around, and before long they were met there by Ichigo, Orihime, Ryu, Chad, and Tatsuki, whom had informed the others of her new involvement in spiritual affairs. Once they got to the roof, Naruto looked over at Tatsuki. Tatsuki-chan, the first day of training is today. Right after this, is that good with you? Tatsuki stiffened at suddenly being put on the spot but nodded, good. Make sure you eventually get the hand seals I taught you on the first day down. Don't wind up with stupid hands like I had when I first started having to use them. The sooner you can flow with them without thinking the better. Ichigo looked confused at the conversation going on between Naruto and Tatsuki. How the hell did they even meet up to talk to each other in the first place, and now she's training with him? Alright Naruto, what's going on? Why are you here? Naruto turned towards him and walked over to the gate surrounding the edge of the roof, leaning against it next to Gaara. Trust me, I don't want to be here, but too many people have given me reasons to. He tilted his head towards his fellow shinobi friend. First of all, I have to watch out for him and make sure he understands how everything works in this world. Naruto then smirked. He's a friend from my childhood among other things, and he's a partner of mine as of today. How? Chad asked, knowing what he knew of Naruto. Long story. Gaara said plainly before reverting to silence. Naruto grinned and pointed his thumb at him. Isn't he a talkative fella? The good humor on Naruto's face then dropped. Look boy wonder, I'm here to say that things are about to get very scary around here for you very soon. I can help you get ready for what's to come, but you have to trust me. Do you trust me? He asked. Ichigo recoiled and blinked as he took a moment to think. Do I trust Naruto? He's weird as hell. The weirdest guy I've ever met, period, and weirder than Geta Boshi, and he's strong as hell too. But he did help us save Rukia, and Yoruichi and even Urahara seem to trust him, so why shouldn't I? Still, he just couldn't bring himself to do so. He couldn't think of a single logical reason to mistrust Naruto, but there was just something about him that he couldn't get past. Thanks, but no thanks. I don't think I need the help. Gaara raised a non-existent eyebrow while Naruto's lips twisted into a sneer. Are you kidding me? Kid, if I didn't think you needed the help I wouldn't have even brought it up. If you still don't trust me, then at least be man enough to say so instead of trying to hide behind some bullshit bravado. Do you really think you don't need the help to get ready for what's about to come? He gestured towards himself as he placed a hand on Gaara. Come here and put your hand on my shoulder and see if you still say that. All of you. Orihime was the first to quickly walk over and place her hand on Naruto's shoulder, giving him a bright smile to show him that she trusted him even if Ichigo was skeptical. He had given none of them a reason to doubt anything he had said thus far. This was the reasoning that Chad and Ryu came to as they did the same. Tatsuki figured that she had to trust the person that was going to teach her, and Orihime trusted him, so she did as well, placing her hand on his shoulder with the others. Why do you want us to do that? Ichigo asked, still keeping his distance. Naruto gave him a deadpan look. A demonstration. Now get over here with the others before I make you. You can't grab that badge of yours fast enough to keep me from grabbing you first, I guarantee it. He said, taking his hand off of Gaara and pointing it at Ichigo. Bansho 10. Okay. Ichigo said, walking over reluctantly. It was either walk over or let Naruto drag him over with his freaky powers. Once he got close, Ichigo stared at his own hand for a moment, contemplating what this could all be about. Maybe he'd teleport them all thousands of miles away or something like that. Tatsuki eventually got tired of Ichigo's timidity and grabbed him by the wrist, forcing him to put his hand on Naruto's shoulder like everyone else and putting a smirk on the blonde immortal's face as the Rinnegan flickered in his eyes for a moment, allowing him to surround the hand he had on Gaara with black chakra as he actually made full physical contact with Gaara's soul. And just like that, a sudden rush of Reiatsu brought everyone attached to Naruto to their knees. Gaara merely blinked and looked over at Naruto, who was grinning madly. Was that really necessary, Naruto? He asked his friend. I'd like to think it was. He responded before looking over at the others who had varying degrees of reaction to what they had just felt. Chad had stumbled back and was using the gate around the roof to keep himself up, Ryu had clutched his chest tightly and was shaking. Orihime and Tatsuki had actually hit their knees from it, and Ichigo just stared at Naruto with a thin sheen of sweat on his face. You guys feel that? He asked sarcastically. Ichigo wiped his forehead. What was that? That. Naruto pointed over at Gaara. That was him. That was all him. That wasn't all Gaara. What Naruto had done was merely expose them to Gaara's Reiatsu by using his own as a medium, but that also involved combining a flare-up of his with Gaara's, so it wasn't really fair. Still, he got his point across, or at least he was going to. Aizen's got a whole army of fighters just like Gaara here, because he's not really human, he's a special kind of hollow. Ryu adjusted his glasses on his face and tried to regain his composure. He's a what? I can't sense anything from him at all out of the ordinary. How is he a hollow? Naruto leaned on Gaara's shoulder with his elbow. Because I had Urahara put Gaara in a Gigai that hid his crushingly massive Reiatsu from people so he wouldn't set off a beacon to every spiritually aware person in 50 miles of Karakura town. And don't get any ideas of trying to kill him either, because not only would you lose, but after you lost I would kick the shit out of you myself. Gaara raised an eyebrow at Naruto's bluffing declaration. Gaara could easily sense that he could beat everyone there with the exception of perhaps Ichigo. He was strong on his own but Gaara could probably defeat him. However, inside of him Gaara could sense something akin to his own power just lurking. How can a Shinigami have an aura of a hollow within? Naruto stood on his own. Do you get my point? Do you really think you don't need the help? If you can honestly tell me that you think you could fight an army of guys with that kind of strength as you are now, then you must be as dumb as I look. Are you serious? Chad said. Behind his bangs his eyes were visibly widened at the disturbing statement that Naruto had just shared with them. What he had just felt was more than comparable with the power of the captain that had beaten him so effortlessly, an army. Naruto nodded. I've seen parts of it. He started walking around the roof around everyone, and this is no joke. If you all want to fight then you're going to need help. My and Yoruichi-chan's and maybe Urahara's help, again. But if you all want to be like Ichigo then you can just stay out of the way, because you'll just end up dead, and that would be a shame because I like all of you. He looked over at Tatsuki and extended his hand to help her up. It's time to go. Are you sure you still want to do this? Once we start we aren't going to stop. Tatsuki nodded in a determined manner. I'm not backing down from this. There isn't anything you can throw at me that would make me run away. We'll see about that. Naruto said before jumping and standing on the top of the fence surrounding the roof. You know where to go. I want you there in 1 hour so we can get started. All of you guys are welcome too if you want to go with her. Just make sure that you don't get in the way. Let's go home, Gaara. He said before jumping back off of the roof. Gaara sighed at his impulsive friend. And this is the man that's supposed to be my boss now. He said in his usual monotone before looking over at the others. It was nice to meet all of you. I hope you sincerely think about listening to what Naruto said though. Gaara made a hand seal and disappeared in a wave of sand that seemed to come from nowhere to hide his departure. Tatsuki looked at where Naruto had just been and then where Gaara had been and blinked in surprise. So this Gaara is a ninja like Naruto-sensei. She smirked and then began heading off towards Naruto's base. Orihime looked at her closest friend as she made her way back down the stairs to leave the school and followed behind. Ichigo noticed them leaving and called out to them, wait. Where are you guys going now? Tatsuki turned to Ichigo with a grin and held her fist out. Duh, I'm going to go train with Naruto so that I can actually get some use out of seeing these ghosts and things. If he's offering then why wouldn't I? Orihime cheerfully spoke up next, and I'm going with her. Chad shrugged his shoulder and began walking after them. I guess I'll go too. Ryu didn't say a word. He just followed along with the large teenage boy as they followed Tatsuki and Orihime to the site Naruto had instructed her to get to. This is crazy, Ichigo muttered as he found himself alone on the roof. How can they just trust him like that? And why can't I? It was seriously irking the young Shinigami. There were 3 people, Yoruichi, Urahara, and Naruto. All 3 of them had overseen some aspect of his training in the past and of the 3 of them he only trusted 2. Naruto had fought the overall leader of the Gote 13 because of Ichigo wanting to free Rukia and had saved his life from Aizen. Still he couldn't put his trust into him. Gah. I need to go see Geta Boshi, maybe he has something to say about this. he said to no one as he finally left the roof himself. XXX. Standing above the roof of the school on nothing but air, Shinji and Hiyori had been watching the entire exchange between Naruto and Ichigo, and the diminutive female of the pair sneered at what she had seen. What was Uzumaki's dumbass doing? He didn't even bring the Ichigo kid's powers up. Just give it some time. Shinji replied carelessly, let Naruto work out his plan. He said the kid was hard-headed and he was right. If he didn't listen to Naruto over training with him here, then what kind of chance would one of us have in getting him to train with us? Hiyori huffed and crossed her arms. I would have just knocked the idiot out and dragged him back to the warehouse. Shinji smirked, and that is why you fail. A sandal then slapped him across the back of the head, that too. XXX. Naruto's base. Down in the training area of the facility, Naruto and Gaara stood with Yoruichi as the Shinigami that had come for their mission were about to return home. Time to go so soon? Naruto asked Soi Fan as she held a Jigokucho, hell butterfly, in her hand. We have to return and report on what we've seen, Uzumaki. Soi Fan said, turning to allow the butterfly to fly over to Omaeda, open the Senkaimon Omaeda. She returned her attention to Naruto. I will have to tell Yamamoto Sutaku about your Arankar allies. It's okay. Naruto said, putting off any tension that this may have brought up, if Soi Fan cared or not, and his bet was on the latter. Yamamoto Gigi said I could make my own damn squad, and if he has a problem with it he can direct his concerns to the nearest brick wall, since a brick wall would care just as much as I would. I need battle-ready fighters here, and they don't come much more battle-ready than Hidan and Gaara. Speaking of Hidan, he had wondered where everyone was and found his way down to the training area, since there was always someone down there. Right before he was about to boisterously make his presence known, he locked eyes with Gaara, who stared back at him impassively. The two simply looked at each other for a moment before Hidan tilted his head up. Sup? Gaara nodded to him, and that was that. Naruto gave them both a dry look, honestly expecting some kind of fireworks between them and admitting that the lack of them left him slightly disappointed, but then again Gaara never had to fight Hidan or deal with anyone he killed, and Hidan had never particularly cared about capturing Jinchuriki back in the day, so it wasn't that far-fetched. Soi Fan had to at least agree that if Naruto was going to keep going into Hawako Mundo, then he needed strong people with him. That was a given. What, was he going to just wage a one-man guerrilla war against Aizen, two other ex-Captain Shinigami, and whatever else the man had up his sleeve, along with an entire plane of hollows of all shapes and sizes? Then she really would have considered him an insane idiot. We'll be in touch. By this time the other-worldly gates that formed the Senkaimon had been opened for them to return home. Yoruichi waved to her former student. Sooner than you think, Soi Fan. We can go to the Soul Society anytime we want, remember? Naruto can give you a follow-up of last night anytime you want. Soi Fan just narrowed her eyes at Naruto, forcing the blonde to give Yoruichi an incredulous look as if to ask her why she would have brought that up. Luckily Omaeda was smart enough to not openly voice his own curiosity at what had just been said, having been kicked by his captain in the past for other bouts of stupidity less personal than this seemed. Luckily, Nemu managed to divert the awkwardness away towards herself. I was unable to gain a reproductive sample this time, Uzumaki-san. Perhaps the next meeting when there is more time. Naruto looked at Nemu with a deadpan expression as Gaara looked at him curiously, and Hidan began to laugh uproariously. So not appropriate, Nemu-chan. Naruto said before she shrugged and walked through the portal, followed by Omaeda. Naruto then grinned at Soi Fan. Can I have a goodbye hug, Joubaki? Sure. She said unexpectedly, getting Naruto to brighten up and walk towards her with his arms outstretched. If by goodbye you mean goodbye, and by hug you mean stab repeatedly in the kidney. That stopped him right where he stood. Naruto let his arms drop. It just so happens that I did in fact not mean that. Soi Fan smirked at him, having his bubble burst, so no hug. She shook her head. Damn. Soi Fan turned towards the Senkaimon and began walking towards it, planning on leaving. Tough luck, Uzumaki. She said before she found herself picked up from behind with arms wrapped around her. Tough luck this. Naruto said happily as he stole a hug. It wasn't an offer. I was going to get my hug one way or another. He then found himself thrown 20 feet away as a result of an elbow to the head. I forgot that you were way stronger without the Gigai. He said from his back with a bruise growing on his forehead. Soy Fawn had her back still turned to the rest of them to hide the red on her face. I swear, you make me sick Uzumaki. Love you too Joubaki. Naruto said, groaning as he poked his angry red bruise. With that, Soy Fawn walked through the portal as it closed behind her and reverted back to nothing, leaving the remainder of Naruto's currently recruited team there by themselves. As Naruto picked himself up off of the ground and dusted himself off, the trio of Arrancar that had somehow accompanied him back after the last trip to Hueco Mundo came out of hiding. The skinny male one, Peshi, spoke up, is the angry lady Shinigami gone? Yoruichi looked around before realizing that they were talking about Soy Fawn and nodded. Yes, now I want to know why you all followed Naruto back to this world. The large one, Dondochaka answered her, we were all standing around in the place where all those Shinigami and the blonde guy killed Aizen-sama's men. There's no way we were going to stick around there and be punished for that. Lesser of two evils, don't you know? Fine. Naruto said, making a hand seal, no sweat, I'll just send you guys back and. No. All three of them shouted, we don't wanna go back. The little girl Arrancar Nel too said, can we stay here for a while? Naruto wanted to say no, but it was a little girl. How could he make a little girl, even an Arrancar little girl, go back to Hueco Mundo? Someone would have had to have ice water in their veins to make her go back there, even with her weird companions, okay. But you guys have got to stay under the radar. It's one thing bringing back Gaara on a whim, because with him I can explain why I did it and he's my buddy, but you guys are different. You won't even know we were here. Peshi said before running up to Naruto and patting him on the back. Say, you're not that bad after all. At first I thought you were going to kill us all in a painful way and then turn us into trophies of your victory, but boy did you ever prove me wrong. Naruto's eye twitched as he looked at the Arrancar. There's a little girl not 20 feet from me and you're saying this stuff. That would make it kind of hard to get her to trust me, wouldn't it? He said before looking over at the little girl who was smiling at him good-naturedly. Nell isn't scared of you. Nell admitted with a shake of her head, not even a bit. Dondochaka then picked her up, and that's that. If our Nell likes you then that's good enough for us, so our lives are in your hands Mr. Nata Shinigami. But no pressure though. Peshi added as an afterthought. Obviously. Naruto said before sighing and waving them off, just go upstairs for right now would you? Gaara will show you. And with that, Gaara led the other three Arrancar upstairs leaving Hidan and Yoruichi with Naruto. Hidan watched them leave and then addressed Naruto, so what are you going to do to help the Sand Kid get out of his Gigai? Naruto then palmed his forehead, should I need to do something about that don't I? But I can't just take Gaara all over the place right after getting him into school even though leaving without him would piss him off. Naruto smirked, hey, that's just a bonus. But yeah, Hidan you and I are going to be leaving to go raid another one of my hiding spots to grab something for Gaara so that he has something cool to eject from his Gigai, like a welcoming present for the team from the guys that used to be shinobi. Naruto-sensei. Naruto turned towards the entrance to the basement to find Tatsuki running towards them dressed for training. She had her hands wrapped in tape and wore a pair of black shorts with a white tank top to go with black athletic shoes. I'm ready. I can see that. Naruto said with a smile on his face as he also noticed Chad, Ryu, and Orihime follow after her shortly thereafter. He knew they would come, and he also figured that Ichigo wouldn't. Stupid brat, so how do you all like my base of operations? Ryu looked around and noticed that it was quite similar to the room underneath Urahara's shop. What kind of operations do you do? He asked. Naruto looked over at him and blinked. What kind of operations don't we do? He began listing things off on his fingers. Freelance hollow extermination, Yoruichi-chan can perform the kansu, and we'll take almost any job if the money is good and it doesn't go against our morals, because that's what shinobi do. Hidan snorted, what morals? Naruto rolled his eyes at the silver-haired Arrancar and looked back over at their visitors, so you guys can go somewhere and train yourselves, or you can hang out and watch me train Tatsuki-chan. Good luck Tatsuki-chan. Orihime said exuberantly for her friend. Naruto stood in front of Tatsuki and crossed his arms as everyone else cleared the area. Okay, first of all show me the hand seals. Tori, bird, I, boar, inu, dog, tatsu, dragon, ushi, ox, tora, tiger, mi, snake, nei, rat, uma, horse, suru, monkey, yu, hare, hitsuji, ram. Tatsuki went through all of the hand seals Naruto instructed her to show and stopped on the last one, the ram seal, with a nervous look on her face, hoping she didn't get them all mixed up. Naruto nodded at her performance, happy that she was able to remember all 12. But honestly it wasn't rocket science, if only someone had told him that when he was 8 years old. Now show me some flair. What? She asked him in reply, not really getting what he was talking about as her hands fell from the ram seal. Naruto sighed, he thought what he said was cool, but she didn't know what the hell he was talking about. Maybe that one wouldn't catch on after all. He grabbed her hands and put them back into the ram seal. Just, fire up your chakra for me so I can see you do it firsthand. Tatsuki did as instructed and channeled her chakra through her entire body. Ryu studied her intently as due to the loss of his powers he couldn't really train, thus he sat on the sidelines with Orihime and the docile Chad and watched, so this is the power that Naruto uses. He could sense that Tatsuki had it, that's why he's training her. Naruto gave her the signal to kill the power so to speak and she dropped the hand seal. Okay, now when I learned all of this there were tons of other things that went into my education. Physical conditioning, you sure as hell don't need that. Tatsuki grinned and flexed in a taunting manner as Naruto continued, overall world knowledge. You're a damn high school student at this point and anything you actually need to know Yoruichi-chan would be better suited towards teaching you than me. The ability to focus intently on your inner power. I don't know how you'll do with that or how good you are at it, but we'll see. Tatsuki was liking the way this sounded more and more. Less talking, more teaching her to fight. That's what she liked. You're fast for a regular person. Way faster than a regular person. It won't take much at all to get you to where I need you for that. Naruto said, liking the fact that training Tatsuki was going to probably be pretty low maintenance. You're strong as hell. But I wonder how tough you are. She blinked at that. I'm going to teach you a few things and then I'm going to give you a test. And you are going to hate my guts after the test. Let's get started then. Tatsuki said, jabbing at the air, all revved up. Come on, what's first? Naruto shrugged, that's up to you in this case. Do you want to know how to throw weapons? Tatsuki frowned and shook her head, like the hands-on approach huh? Well that's okay. I don't need to teach you taijutsu so that's out, and I guess I'll have to get you something to use to make up for that. He scratched his head, the curriculum he had to go through as a kid was making sense to him now. It was all to set up him learning the basic ninjutsu he ended up practicing in his final graduation years. Now that he didn't have to teach Tatsuki that stuff it was far easier. Okay, time to put those hand seals to good use. First jutsu you're going to learn is Kawarimi no Jutsu, substitution jutsu, because you can't fight if someone cleaves you in half so you'd better learn how to dodge. Tatsuki cringed, but nodded, realizing that he wasn't even joking about that. It's okay, I'll be fine. Poor girl didn't know what she had gotten herself into. XXX. Urahara shop. With Ichigo. I just don't get it you know. Ichigo griped, walking around in a circle while Urahara sat at his table watching him in amusement. This is great. Ichigo's going insane and I don't even have to do any personal work to drive the kid nuts. Urahara thought before Ichigo continued his rant as it was clear he only wanted someone to vent on more or less. Is it me? Ichigo asked, pointing at himself in an animated fashion. I mean, there really isn't any reason for me not to like Naruto. Am I just an asshole? Maybe, Urahara said in a theorizing fashion, maybe you have a latent crush on Yoruichi. Yeah, and Naruto sleeping with her pissed you off. He finished, basically counting down in his head before the explosion would be forthcoming. I don't have a crush on Yoruichi. Ichigo shouted at him before thinking about the other part of that statement. Wait, I didn't even know they slept together. Why would I want to know that? How would I have even known that in the first place? Urahara started waving his fan in front of his face. He didn't tell you when he saw you again. That's weird because if it was me I'd have told everyone I knew after it happened. Hell I probably would have told people that I didn't know. He noticed Ichigo's anger rising. Don't worry Ichigo, other than Tessai you'd have been the first to know. I wouldn't want to, you creepy bastard. Ichigo shouted. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea, but who else would he be able to talk to about this? Beggars couldn't be choosers in this case. Can we get back on topic here? Urahara nodded, having had enough of using Yoruichi's being overtly sexy to tease Ichigo. That was amateur hour. A real professional could tease someone with their own insecurities, and if he was good enough he would be able to make Ichigo see how stupid he was being by not trusting Naruto. Well, why don't you just fight him? Ichigo stopped in his tracks and stared at Urahara. What did you just say? Got him. Urahara thought before continuing to speak. Yeah, just go and fight him. Think about it, when you fight people you find out more than you ever would have if you just asked them about it, so if there was really something you didn't know that rubbed you the wrong way about Naruto you'd think about it while you were fighting and you could ask him about it then. Inwardly Urahara was laughing, man that sounded absolutely asinine, it's so perfect. He was just waiting on Ichigo to tell him how stupid that sounded. However, in the mind of Ichigo he realized something different, that Urahara was 100% absolutely correct. Every single question that Ichigo had ever needed to have answered, how his mother actually died, why Ryu was so intent on beating Shinigami, how to get his Zanpakuto back, why Renji wanted to fight him so badly, why Byakuya was so intent on not trying to help Rukia, everything. Every single question he ever had recently was being answered while he was in the middle of a goddamn fight. With this in mind, Ichigo robotically turned and left Urahara's house, leaving one confused scientist behind. Oh shit, he didn't take that seriously, did he? He asked no one in particular. Nah, Ichigo's a smart kid. There's no way he took that literally. XXX. 4 days later, Karakura High School. Tatsuki glared at Naruto as she and Orihime walked with him and Gaara to the base. I hate you, Naruto-sensei. Orihime had been more than welcome at the base over the last few days as Tatsuki did her damnedest to learn Naruto's kawarimi, which he made her practice once she got the process down, by throwing rocks at her. Rocks of all shapes and sizes, with results varying. Naruto walked with his hands in his pockets as he ignored the angry glare from his student. You need to learn how to get hit by rocks. Tatsuki asked, gritting her teeth. Well, that doesn't hurt. He said with a chuckle, actually it does, but that's not the point. The point is how to dodge the rocks. Dodging with kawarimi will save your ass when you need it. I'm drilling that into your head. At your level basics will kill either you or your opponent. He then pointed at Orihime, and since our resident sweetheart here is always there with us we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone and have her practice healing people when I fuck you up. Tatsuki would have tried to hit him right then if she hadn't just seen him hurl a boulder 3 times his size at her not even 24 hours ago. The chances of her walking away from an unprovoked assault were slim and none as far as she could see. Too bad she didn't know that Naruto was genetically dispositioned to letting girls lay into him. Anyway, you're doing great. The test is today, but I won't be the one giving it to you. Gaara is. Naruto informed her, pointing at the redhead in question. I have to go somewhere for a bit. I have to go grab an artifact for you to use when you get better, and I have to get something for Gaara too. I should be back Tuesday if Hidan doesn't make me drag ass and slow me down. Gaara cut in to inform Tatsuki of her schedule. Test today, rest during the weekend. He said. As she opened her mouth to say she could keep training with them over the weekend, Gaara cut in again. You're really not going to be able to train after this test. At least you won't want to train. He turned towards Naruto. Why am I doing this again? Naruto rolled his eyes, because it's your goddamn job. I'm paying you, aren't I? He looked at a watch on his wrist and frowned. It's time for me to get going. I'll see you guys when I get back. Don't blow up the base. He looked around and saw no one watching before he ran up the side of a building to take to the rooftops. Tatsuki watched him do that and went wide-eyed. When am I going to learn how to do that? After you pass the first test. Gaara said. Naruto also left me and instructed me to teach you an actual ninjutsu for combat once you pass, if you can pass before he returns, that is. Orihime looked between Tatsuki and Gaara. So what's the test? Gaara looked at her and both girls could swear that a smirk formed on his face for just a moment. You'll see once we begin. XXX. On a hill overlooking Karakura town, Hidan leaned against a rental car when he felt a familiar presence and glowered as Naruto appeared in a swirl of leaves. I got the scrolls you sealed in the rental car, you ass. You want anything else? Want me to shine your shoes? Maybe clean out your stable? Naruto ignored him and hopped in the front seat. Well, if I did, I could make you because I'm your boss and I fucking pay you. Now did you get the tickets? Hidan flashed a pair of plane tickets from his pocket as he got into the passenger's seat. Beautiful. Let's just go. Hidan grumbled. I'm fucking dreading this trip. The climate is going to absolutely suck. Naruto rolled his eyes as he took the keys from Hidan. Sorry princess, but it's going to be a goddamn desert. Why would I hide stuff in hospitable climates and places easy to reach? Use your head. Naruto. Naruto turned his head and saw Ichigo standing behind him in his Shinigami garb. Raising an eyebrow at seeing Ichigo all the way out there in his Shinigami form, Naruto spoke. What's up, Wonder Boy, you need some help or something? I want to fight you. Ichigo said with determination in his voice. Right now, before you go. I have some questions that you can answer and this is the only way. Naruto and Hidan looked at each other before Hidan shrugged, not really having much of an opinion on the matter. Naruto handed the car keys back to Hidan and got out of the car. Are you sure? I mean, you could just ask me whatever you want to know. There's not much to hide. Ichigo shook his head with a frown. I don't know why, but I can't trust you. Maybe if I fight you, I don't know, maybe I'll find out why and I can get over it or something. Naruto slammed the door to the car and walked away from it. He was still dressed in his uniform from school, but he didn't care about that right then. Well, if you think you need to. I didn't want to fight you yet though, Ichigo. You're not going to like it. Ichigo took that as Naruto saying he was weak. However, that wasn't what Naruto was implying at all about a battle between the two of them. Just do it so we can get this over with. Ichigo was ready to move on with matters. He was sick of obsessing over this. If what Naruto told him really was true, he would have needed to get himself in gear and prepare for what Aizen had in store. Naruto nodded and looked around before motioning to Ichigo to follow him, activating swift release as Ichigo used Shunpo to follow him. Hidan just sat in the car and drummed his fingers on the dashboard. This better not take all day, the flight's at 6. XXX. At the top of a field on a grassy hill, Naruto stood across from Ichigo with his arms crossed, and he didn't even have the Raijin no Ken with him. He left it with his luggage that Hidan had. It didn't matter though, it was more of a luxury than anything. He didn't need it for this. Ichigo just needed to clear his head and he was kind of like him in this respect. A fight helped with that, Naruto could respect that. Well, Naruto said as he could see the sun begin to wane in the distance, you were the one that called me out, so let's go already. Ichigo frowned as he pulled his Zanpakuto from his back. I'm waiting for you to draw a weapon to fight me with. Aren't you going to use one of those kunai things or something? He asked, not feeling right about attacking an unarmed opponent. Naruto dropped his arms from across his chest and shook his head. If I needed a weapon, I'd be using a weapon, Ichigo. Naruto vanished from Ichigo's sight and the boy turned around on pure instinct to block a kick with the width of his sword. Don't show an opponent that thinks they know otherwise mercy, because there's probably a reason they think so. Ichigo narrowed his eyes at Naruto. I'll keep that in mind. He said before pulling his sword back and taking a swing at Naruto, who simply jumped back out of the way. His inhibitions at attacking an unarmed man now gone at Naruto's insistence, Ichigo attempted to follow up, hot on Naruto's heels as the shinobi backstepped away from him. From the sleeve of Naruto's shirt, a kunai ejected itself into his hand just as Ichigo finally closed the distance on him and slashed horizontally. Naruto blocked the attack and saw the surprise in Ichigo's eyes at Naruto having a blade hidden on him. On second thought, having a weapon might keep me from getting all cut up and having to explain to people at the airport in the next few towns over why I'm all bloody. Naruto's small but dense blade was able to keep Ichigo's massive weapon from reaching his body as the two struggled against each other. Ichigo's monstrous strength helped him go head-to-head with Zaraki Kenpachi, and yet Naruto was able to keep him back with nothing more than a sign of struggling on his face. The two forced each other away and Naruto stepped back in, taking slashes at Ichigo with his small black knife that Ichigo managed to block with his Zanpakuto. Naruto jumped back and held his weapon up in case Ichigo just flat out rushed him. Do you feel any better yet? He asked. Ichigo blinked in confusion of Naruto just stopping the battle to ask him if he was over his issue yet. No. He answered honestly. Naruto shut his eyes and shrugged. Alright then. Naruto's Reiatsu spiked and he thrust one hand out at Ichigo, opening his eyes to reveal the Rinnegan to him, Shinra Tensei, heavenly subjugation of the omnipresent god. Ichigo's body was violently forced away from Naruto. Then that just means that we're not fighting hard enough yet. Ichigo rolled through and recovered. Gah, that felt like he punched me right in the chest as hard as he could. He thought to himself as he came at Naruto again, intent on finding the answer to his unknown question. If that's what you want, then you've got it. Kid can take a hit, that's for damn sure. Naruto thought as he jumped out of the way of Ichigo's responsive attack, taking to the air as he stood in the skies. Ichigo showed that he had at least been honing his skills with his ho-ho by heading up as well to meet Naruto midair. Well, if you're still game, take this. Futen. Renkuden wind release. Drilling air bullet. Naruto fired off a compressed ball of wind from his mouth, rapid fire with not much buildup to it. Despite the speed of the attack, Ichigo was able to utilize his shunpo to avoid the attack, letting it crash into the ground below. Ichigo appeared behind Naruto with his sword already drawn back for an attack. He stood too close however, and Naruto was able to grab his wrist tightly, stopping his from making his swing. Naruto delivered a punishing side kick to Ichigo's stomach and whirled around to throw him away before quickly conjuring up another Futen. Renkuden wind release, drilling air bullet, and firing it at Ichigo while he was still prone and flying through the air. Ichigo righted himself in the air and gasped as he saw the rippling ball of air hurtling through the sky at him. Ichigo drew his sword back and released a crescent energy blast from the tip of his sword, meeting Naruto's attack in the air and exploding on contact. Through the smoke from the explosion, Naruto flew through it with his right arm drawn back, a blue orb of energy in it. Ichigo held up his sword and heard the grinding noise of Naruto's Rasengan smashing against his blade. After a moment, the energy behind Naruto's jutsu sent Ichigo flying back through the air again. Ichigo grit his teeth at being repelled back twice in one battle thus far and missed a second figure flying from the cloud of smoke that Naruto had originally come out of. It got the drop on Ichigo by attacking from above, and Ichigo almost didn't react to it in time, preparing to cut right through the Naruto above him. Bunshin Daibaku, a clone great explosion. The Naruto Ichigo had planned on attacking smirked devilishly before lighting up and exploding right before Ichigo managed to touch him, sending Ichigo's body falling from the sky to hit the ground. Naruto stood in the air, watching Ichigo's motionless body on the ground. He isn't done yet. That hurt, but he isn't done by a long shot. What's the kid thinking? Covered in scuffs, burns, and a few bloody spots, Ichigo just stared up into the sky at Naruto, laying there on his back. That's why. That's why I can't trust you, because you don't fight straightforward. Nothing you do in a fight is head-on. You make it seem like you're going to, but it's just a feint. It's always a feint, always something that makes people look the other way while you do something else. He shut his eyes as he stood back up. If that's how you are in battle when a person's true nature is supposed to be shown, then, yeah, that's why I can't trust you, Naruto. Not until I'm given a true reason to. I'm sorry. You could really be a nice guy, but my gut is telling me to be wary of you, and the way that you fight isn't proving my gut wrong. Naruto noticed Ichigo staring up at him blankly and he returned the stare, neither man moving an inch until Ichigo's Reiatsu began to heighten. Here we go. Bankai. Ichigo's appearance changed to that of one long black coat and his Zanpakuto changed to its thin jet black form, Tensa Zanjetsu, heaven chain slaying moon. Naruto nodded and he allowed himself to enter sage mode with the chakra he had gathered while Ichigo had been on the ground staring, with the orange pigment around his eyes signifying his use of the technique. Let's see what you've got, Wonder Boy. Naruto said right before he and Ichigo vanished from sight. Naruto suddenly appeared, delivering a kick that seemed to slice through Ichigo's body. However, this Naruto just narrowed his eyes before being cut clean through, disappearing in a puff of smoke. Another clone. Ichigo muttered. Afterimage, Naruto said, speaking of when his clone thought it had kicked Ichigo, okay, you've got some moves. You're a really quick study. But, Naruto said, holding his hand out towards Ichigo in a tiger seal with the back of his hand facing Ichigo. He smirked and made a come-hither motion with his two extended fingers, Bansho Tenon, heavenly attraction of all of creation. Ichigo found himself jerked off of his feet towards Naruto. Trying to dig his feet in to keep from being drawn forward towards what seemed to be the center of a void, Naruto himself. Ichigo stabbed his Zanpakuto into the ground in front of him to keep from sliding anymore as he saw Naruto now focusing with his full hand to pull Ichigo in. Ichigo's sword began cracking the ground, so not good. This is my only real anchor. If this gives way then I'm going to fly right towards him. His eyes then widened. Wait, everything's going to fly right towards him. Ichigo jumped backwards as hard as he could, pulling his sword from the ground and buying himself a tenth of a second before he was sucked forward, but that was all the time he needed for his plan. Ichigo quickly swung his sword and released another crescent blast of energy at Naruto. Naruto's focus with his jutsu sucking in everything that had to do with Ichigo also drew in his attack that flew at Naruto double time. By the time Naruto released the jutsu, the attack was too fast for him to dodge on a dime without taking an unprotected hit, and he crossed his arms over his chest and face to shield them as the attack hit home. Finally got him. Ichigo shouted excitedly as the attack exploded on Naruto. You know damn well you didn't kill him with that. Ichigo heard in his head, I'd be surprised if he even had a decent wound on him anywhere from that one, I doubt he's even bleeding at all. It taunted in a sadistic fashion. Phew. Ichigo heard from the aftermath of his attack, that one was pretty good Ichigo. The smoke cleared to reveal Naruto still standing there in thoroughly ruined school clothes. He reached for a shallow cut that had formed on his chest that was already healing steadily. You cut me in sage mode, that's really good. Told you. The sinister voice in Ichigo's head said before cackling evilly. You just don't have what it takes to beat a guy like that. You saw his eyes when you two were up close. That guy's a killer, a true warrior. If he was serious with you he'd crush you and chew you right up. You should let me take over. No. Now shut up and leave me alone. I can fight Naruto all on my own. Ichigo asserted as he noticed Naruto giving him a strange look, probably due to his seeming hesitation to continue the fight. Here goes Naruto, I hope you're ready. Ichigo said, getting his attention back on the fight as he launched at Naruto again. Oh well, it's your funeral. The voice in Ichigo's head cackled again derisively. Naruto set himself in a basic taijutsu stance and waited as Ichigo came closer. Naruto shut his eyes, able to easily sense Ichigo's blazing level of power from him in this form, good enough to see him without his eyes. Without warning, Naruto lashed out with a punch once he felt Ichigo get into range. Ichigo saw Naruto miss the hit and thought he had narrowly dodged one that would have probably rung his bell pretty damn good. He thought that until he felt a punch sock him right in the jaw with a tooth-rattling shot. He didn't even touch me. Kawazu Kumite, Frog Kata. Naruto said plainly, shifting around in his stance, the energy around my body can be like a solid extension of my body that only I can see. He saw Ichigo stop sliding back and stumble around slightly. You Shinigami really are a tough bunch. That would have put any normal person out. No living human he had actually deemed it necessary to punch while in sage mode woke up to tell the tale. I'm not really a human like this Naruto. Ichigo said, spitting blood from his mouth, my body is tough. Really tough. Naruto nodded. Yoruichi-chan said that a Shinigami's life force is their Raryoku. If that's the case then no wonder he can keep getting up from the stuff I'm doing. I can't keep taking it easy on him if I want to end this. Ooh, you see that look on his face. He's going to fucking finish you now, just watch. Shut up. Ichigo was finding it harder to concentrate on his fight as the voice in his head grew more and more persistent and louder. I can beat him. You seem to be the kind of guy that likes to crash into someone and see if you can stand up afterwards. Naruto said, bringing both of his hands together and expanding them to reveal a Rasengan that was covered in white wind blades. Well, I'm kind of a fan of that too. So how about it? He asked with a smile that showed he was loving this little battle. Ichigo was going to respond positively when his inner voice chimed in again. You can feel the power rolling off of that thing in his hands, you know you want to back down. Just let me take over and I'll cut right through that move. Ichigo grit his teeth to block the voice as he spoke to Naruto. You've got it Naruto. The two charged directly at each other with Ichigo charging up everything he had in his sword and Naruto doing the same with his attack in his hands. Naruto shoved his attack out to meet Ichigo's sword, Fuden, Rasengan, wind release, spiraling sphere. Ichigo shouted in return as they smashed into each other, clashing in a large explosion of power that forced clouds up high above the ground. XXX. With Hidan. Fucking Uzumaki, Hidan said to himself as he saw the cloud of smoke and dust raise from where he knew the two had gone a few minutes ago. I knew he'd go overboard. Of course, due to the fact that he didn't know Naruto's opponent at all, he had no idea that Naruto was only partially susceptible to taking the blame on this one. We are going to be so fucking late, we're going to miss the goddamn flight. XXX. Naruto vs. Ichigo. Naruto stood with scratches all over his body and a tired look on his face as he stood with Ichigo in a crater formed by their clash. He turned his head around once he heard the clang of Ichigo's sword hitting the ground only to see Ichigo still standing up. Naruto turned his full body around and saw the wounds open on Ichigo. He had clearly taken the worst of it, but the fact that he was still standing and looked able to keep going full blast was nothing less than impressive. You work yourself out of whatever you were dealing with, Wonder Boy. He asked, getting no response. Hey, can you hear me? Did I injure your throat or something? Talk to me here, Ichigo. I'm not really Ichigo, sorry. A distorted voice said, coming from Ichigo's body. You could talk to me in his place though. Naruto smirked and deactivated his sage mode. I think you'd rather fight me though. He, you've got that right. Ichigo shouted as he turned around and ripped Ichigo's Zanpakuto from the ground to rush Naruto like a bull. On the boy's face was a white mask with red markings going down the face. I knew you were in there. Naruto said quietly before his entire body took on a flaming glow, covered in a dark-colored chakra, making him look as if his body was covered in black flames. He shot an arm out that grabbed Ichigo's body and halted the berserk teen in his tracks as he snarled and writhed in the grip. Naruto squeezed and elicited a breathless, strained grunt as he used his other hand to stretch out and grab the mask, peeling it off of Ichigo's face and tossing it aside. Naruto dropped Ichigo's body to the ground and after a few seconds Ichigo began to stir and get back up. What in the hell was that? That was the hollow stuck inside of you. Naruto said, his own body turning back to normal as there was no more need to go any further. You've had it since at least the fight with Kenpachi, since I saw that right after Yoruichi brought you to that hideout. He said, pointing at the mask he discarded from Ichigo's face. Ichigo held his head in his ribs, feeling as if he had just played the part of a walnut stuck in a nutcracker. That's what that thing was. I thought it was my conscience or something. Naruto let out a chuckle at that. It definitely didn't feel natural, but what was the power that you just used? Naruto pointed at his chest. You might as well call that my hollow stuck inside of me. It's the same concept even if it isn't the same thing. Naruto tried to explain. If you don't get control of it, your hollow is going to try and possess you each time you find yourself in a tough fight. The more of them you get into, the stronger its presence gets. I would have told you this sooner, but would you have listened to me? Ichigo looked down at the ground in embarrassment. I probably wouldn't have. Naruto put a hand on his shoulder. I'm not out to get you, Ichigo. I'm on your side, and I want you to beat this thing. I know people that can help if you'll listen to me. What did he have to lose at this point? That hollow just snatched control of his body away from him and tried to kill Naruto. If Naruto wasn't as strong as he was then, it might have done just as much if not more damage than it had done to Byakuya during their fight. Okay. He said, thinking that he owed Naruto something for embarrassingly losing control during the battle. I'll give it a try. Naruto grinned at him. Great. But you're going to hate these guys at first. Still, they're going to help you out. Trust me. There, that went again. Trust me. And for once Ichigo didn't see anything wrong with it. Naruto could have just killed him for being the nuisance he was, but he didn't. Alright. I'll trust you just this once. He couldn't keep his eyes on both Naruto and whatever the future had in store for him. One wasn't really a threat to him at all, while the other was going to destroy the worlds if he had the chance. XXX. Hueco Mundo, Las Noches. Aizen sat at the head of a great table with only 2 of his Arankar army there with him. I think we've let the Gote 13 see enough of our lands without any repercussions. I believe it's time to show them the power of our forces. The true force of my army, the Espada. He looked over the people in the room with him. I want Konami to head to the world of the living with you two and your fraction if you desire to bring them. Follow his orders. One of the Espada at the table with him was Tia Harabel, yes Aizen-sama. The other was a man with pink hair and glasses on his face, whatever you say Aizen-sama. Can I attempt to capture the strange man that allied himself with the Shinigami? If you wish Zale Aporo. Aizen said with his usual smile. Konami will give you your objectives for this mission, I expect nothing less than success. Omake. Soy Fan's date with Naruto. She was not particularly pleased with this turn of events, mostly the part that had her losing. When she made the bet she did not figure into account the fact that she had a limiter on her powers and Naruto did not. So when Naruto drew his glowing sword and cut a path of destruction through the group of Arankar that had attacked them in Hueco Mundo, smashing her respective score sheet posted doing the same, she felt rather slighted, however she had been the one to make the wager and she intended to go forward with paying off her debt. Hence she waited in the lobby of the base waiting on Naruto while in her gigai, for his instructions. It didn't take long for Naruto to meet her there, dressed in his own street clothes and smiling at her. Don't give me that look Joubaki, this is more for you than for me. I could have made you do something humiliating instead of this. This is plenty humiliating. Soy Fan assured him, crossing her arms as he walked up towards her. Naruto leaned over to get face to face with her. You think going on a date is humiliating? Why? You're so good looking, you should be doing things like this all the time. Soy Fan scoffed and headed for the front door. Well, you're going to be doing this tonight. Don't you have something more important to do right now? Soy Fan said, trying to get him to back down from taking her out, or at least get him to put it off until later. Naruto shook his head as he followed her out into the cool night air. No. Everything we just did can wait until tomorrow. I wouldn't even know how to handle any of it right now anyway, so it's better to clear my head. And what better way to do it than to spend some time with my Joubaki? He said, wrapping an arm around her and getting a growl from her. You could try to enjoy it, you know. Soy Fan stopped growling at him and let him lead her along to wherever he was intending to take her. She sincerely hoped against hope that this wouldn't be a waste of her time. Then again, Naruto had yet to fail since she had met him. XXX. She had expected him to take her to some carnival or something to try and show off, but she would have hated that. She almost expected him to just take her to stupid movie that she had absolutely no interest in seeing. Soy Fan was relatively surprised when she found that the only thing Naruto did was lead her to the riverside and take her for a walk. She subtly tried to stare at him to determine his intentions, but for the time being she was rather enjoying just doing this. Finally Naruto spoke up. I know you don't really like doing anything loud or flashy, and this was the only thing I could think of on short notice that might put a smile on your face other than going to mess with Urahara, unless you want to do that. A smirk came to her lips remembering the havoc Naruto caused in the Seraiti and thinking of what Naruto could bring onto Urahara Kisuke's head, maybe some other time Uzumaki. Naruto shrugged, it was no big loss, he could think of something for them to do, maybe for your birthday then. He suggested instead with a chuckle before returning to thinking, are you hungry? He asked. They had just gotten through with a mission so she might have been. Soy Fan shook her head, not particularly. I could use a snack if that means anything though. A snack. He could do that easily enough. She certainly wasn't proving to be very high maintenance thus far, but that wouldn't have bothered him even if she had been. Heeding her request, Naruto led her to place to get ice cream before they continued to walk. Maybe if he did that then he could think of something to do with her. Soy Fan was certainly being cordial enough, just like he expected her to be. She was always far nicer when she didn't think anyone was watching her, like she had to keep up appearances as a cold and aloof person. As far as he could see the only time when she wasn't like that was with Yoruichi and to a lesser extent with him. This is actually nice. He heard her say suddenly as she kept at eating her ice cream cone. I guess you know me well enough after all Uzumaki. How you would know that I would be more partial to a walk like this than anything else I don't think I'll ever find out, unless you asked Yoruichi-sama, but I don't think you did. She looked over the side of the grassy hill they were walking next to in order to see the moonlit water. Naruto felt like slapping his hand to his forehead. This was a girl that admitted to him that she liked to meditate in her spare time. Why wouldn't she like a simple walk like this? Damn, he thought too hard about things sometimes, but he had good intentions. Still, he was accomplishing his mission. The usually hardened look on Soy Fawn's face was nowhere in sight and she looked rather content at the moment. It was good to see her like that if he was to be honest. I'm glad you're having a good enough time. Naruto said to Soy Fawn, putting his hands in his pockets, I just want you to be happy Yoruichi. Soy Fawn made a humming noise as she started to actually eat the cone her ice cream came in. Having finished it off. That name you call me, why do you call me any kind of name at all? I call you by your actual name. That's an easy question to answer. Naruto said in response, getting Soy Fawn to turn her eyes towards him to get the information from him, because I think we're rather close. I like you. He saw her eyes widen when he admitted it to her, and I have an old habit of giving nicknames to people that I like. Soy Fawn finished off her cone and shook her head at him. How could you possibly say that you like me when most of our relationship is originally based on me trying to kill you? Naruto laughed, surprising her until he spoke. Most of the people I've ended up being friends with are people that tried to hurt me somehow. But you don't want to kill me right now, do you? So it's alright. He saw Soy Fawn smile as well, even if she tried to hide it by turning forward again. Just know that I do care about you, and you've got a friend in me even if you don't want one. You are truly a strange man Uzumaki Naruto. Soy Fawn thought to herself as she smiled in spite of herself, wanting to keep up the appearance that most saw her as day in and day out, but by now she knew that Naruto was well aware of how comfortable she was around him, the disarming bastard. And as a friend, Naruto said with a hint of amusement in his voice, I have the right to help you out when I think you need me. Just like this. He reached over to her face and picked a crumb of the cone she had been eating from the corner of her mouth, stopping her in her tracks in embarrassment as he popped the crumb into his mouth. I couldn't just let you walk around with a crumb on your face Yoruichi, no matter how cute you looked. Even with it being the middle of the night it was still evident how red Soy Fawn's face was as she seemed to seethe in anger. Uzumaki. She shouted as she barreled into him with her tiny body, sending them both down the side of the hill as he laughed the entire way. I will kill you. They settled, both sitting with Naruto holding Soy Fawn's back against him, keeping her from trying to turn and throttle him. Calm down, I knew you were going to hit me once I did that. Mostly because women love to hurt me for some reason, but I'm not holding that against you. Actually I'm holding you against me. He said, laughing again when he felt Soy Fawn squirm to break free again. After a minute or two she finally stopped fighting back and just sat on the side of the hill with Naruto still holding onto her in case she was still ornery. It was a really nice night out and even after Naruto did what he did, something she still couldn't believe he had the gall to do, but that was not the point. Even after that, things could have been far worse everything considered. It had been a long day, it had been a long week in general, and she didn't think anything of it to sit her head back against Naruto's chest as she allowed the tranquil night to calm her. Letting out a sigh, Soy Fawn spoke, I swear, you make me sick Uzumaki. She said with no malice or actual intent in her voice. Naruto simply kept his smile and held onto her once he felt her rest comfortably against him. Love you too Yoruichi. On the road. Fucking hell Uzumaki brat. Hidan grunted angrily as he sat hunched over the steering wheel of the car that he and Naruto were sitting in. We're going to be later than all get out for the flight because you just had to let that Shinigami punk let off some steam. Naruto sat in the passenger seat clutching the armrest hard enough to leave divots from his fingers gripping it. Just calm down Hidan. You can barely drive on normal streets and I barely feel safe with the driving you're doing right now. Hidan was currently piloting their vehicle at a speed of well over 90 miles per hour down the highway towards the large city that the airport of their choice sat in. Meh, who cares? We're immortal. I'm not immortal like that you asshole. I can still die. Naruto shouted at Hidan with anime tears running down his face. Now slow down and pull over. I'm driving damn it. Fuck no. Hidan argued right back. If you drive like the grandpa you are we'll never make it on time for the plane out of here. I hate the desert, but I'm going to love flying on these airplanes I hear so much about. Naruto pulled his seatbelt tighter across his chest as Hidan dragged the car over 3 separate lanes to pass traffic. At this point Naruto was grateful that he was at least staying on their side of the road. If you keep driving we'll never make it because you'll roll the damn car over and blow us all up in flames. You're just being a pussy. Hidan shouted at his boss, we're making great time here. At this rate we'll make it there within the hour. Yeah, they'd make it there in an hour. If there was the hospital, I need to buy my own plane. Naruto cried as he gave up and sat in his seat waiting for sweet death to claim him by way of Hidan getting them into a horrible car accident. I'd learn how to fly, and then I'd have clones run it, and then this kind of shit would never happen. XXX. Karakura Town, Naruto's base. In the training facility, Gaara sat calmly on a rock as Tatsuki stood in her training clothes punching one hand into her other palm with a nervous look on her face. She had felt Gaara's Reiatsu the other day just like all of the others and it was crushing. Luckily for her, Gaara was still in his gigai, just sitting and waiting. Are you ready to begin, Tatsuki? Gaara asked in his usual tone of voice. By now Tatsuki, like most of the others, just accepted that Gaara was always going to talk that way. It didn't mean he wasn't a nice guy, or that there was something really off about him, it was just how he was. Naruto saw him as a close friend, so why shouldn't anyone else? The him being an Arankar thing really wasn't a good excuse since Hidan was one too, and was infinitely more dangerous than Gaara just out of sheer lunacy. Tatsuki nodded to Gaara's question and set herself into a fighting stance. Yes, I'm ready. So what's the test that Naruto-sensei wanted me to take? Gaara dropped down from the rock and walked forward before stopping right in front of Tatsuki with his arms crossed. What's wrong? Are you going to tell me? Gaara merely closed his eyes. One hit. All you need to do is get one hit on me. It doesn't have to hurt, it doesn't have to even be solid, but if you can hit me once then you pass. One time? Tatsuki asked with a raised eyebrow. That seemed too easy to be a test to her. Gaara didn't even get out of that gigai of his before setting the order and it didn't look like he was going to. That's it. That's it. Gaara confirmed for her. I want you to use every little thing that Naruto instructed you on since day one. From how to run to achieve better speeds, to the basic ninjutsu that he taught you. Nothing he taught you will be useless against me here. Use it all. Attack to kill or maim, otherwise you won't get close to laying a finger on me. Kill or maim. Tatsuki repeated in a whisper. She was used to full contact fighting, but there were rules, ethics, things that you just didn't do. She had been fighting in that manner since she was old enough to put on a pair of gloves and now Gaara was telling her to disregard all of that and simply fight to end a life. Gaara's eyes were closed as he nodded solemnly. Your enemies are enemies, they will stop at nothing to achieve whatever goal they are after. When you accepted your abilities you accepted the life of fighting as a warrior, or in this case as a shinobi. I have killed more than my fair share in my time as has Naruto and I don't think you need me to get started on Hidan. Tatsuki gulped and shook her head. Naruto's original plan was to have you fight and defeat a hollow once one appeared, but he figured this test would be more appropriate, because our enemies won't look like outright monsters, they'll look human for the most part. Now enough talk. Take me down if you can, land one blow. I have to fight as if I were trying to kill you, she said mostly to herself before shouting as she ran forward at Gaara. She threw a punch only for sand to stop her punch in its tracks. What? Gaara simply stared at her, seemingly disappointed by her first attack, attacking head-on against a superior opponent. You threw what you've learned right out of the window without being prompted by pressure. Gaara's sand lifted her off of the round and shook her about. You never attack an opponent head-on, even if you are stronger than them. Anything can be waiting for you in the case of a direct attack. Something like this. Gaara dropped Tatsuki to the ground and as she landed on her feet his sand turned into a hand that flicked her in the face, sending her back. Tatsuki sputtered and spat out sand as she held her forehead where Gaara's sand hand hit her. How are you doing that? She asked, pointing at Gaara's ability to control sand. Can Naruto-sensei do that? Am I going to learn that? Gaara shook his head. It's a special ability that only I can do. Naruto can't do that so you can't do that. And you won't be learning anything else until you can hit me. Now use your head. He more or less ordered. Tatsuki put her game face back on and prepared to head in again. She picked up a stone from off of the ground and threw it at Gaara only for it to bounce off of his sand shield and harmlessly, so direct attacks clearly won't work. I know how to work angles in fights, but I'm going to totally have to catch Gaara off guard here. She thought to herself. An opponent won't just let you stand there and think, Tatsuki. Gaara said as he whipped his sand around him as a way to try and intimidate her, so neither will I. Prepare yourself. Soon a shuriken, sand shuriken. Gaara threw projectiles of sand from his own supply and almost smirked when he heard her cry out in alarm as she began to get herself moving to avoid damage. Come on. Naruto and a few others were able to find ways past this to hit me when they were fresh genin. One of them didn't even know any ninjutsu. Of course he also didn't say that the person that hit him sans ninjutsu was 3 times as fast as Tatsuki was. Tatsuki found herself in full retreat as Gaara's sand pursued her endlessly, so I've got to counter his own attack and find a way to catch him off guard and hit him. I think I would have rather fought the hollow for a test than this. She tried to change directions and get the sand to chase her back towards Gaara whom she lost sight of, but when she looked at him again he was still standing right where she left him. This is it. She said as she drew closer to Gaara. All of his stupid sand is chasing me, there's none left to protect him. Gaara's body turned in Tatsuki's direction just in time for her to launch a punch that hit him right in the face. Gotcha. I pass. Now Naruto-sensei's gotta. Wait, what? She said when she realized that her fist passed through Gaara's face as he was made of sand that grabbed a hold of her tightly. Hey, let me go. As you wish. Gaara said, stepping out from behind a boulder as he directed his sand to throw her away. Yelling in alarm as she sailed through the air, Tatsuki finally flipped through and landed on her feet stumbling backwards but satisfied that after a week of training her dexterity had improved as well to go along with the ninjutsu that Naruto taught her and directed her to practice. As Gaara took up his usual place in the middle of the field, directing his sand to work things out for him, Tatsuki was really against trying to get close to Gaara again without a decent plan first. Tatsuki's complete lack of anything ranged was evident here as she stayed back. The most ranged attack she tried was throwing rocks at Gaara while on the run, something that didn't have the faintest chance of working. And Gaara was starting to get bored. A bored Gaara meant bad things for people. In the distant past a bored Gaara might kill someone. This Gaara however, that odd threat that Naruto made to me the other day, how could he possibly apply that in the middle of a battle? He asked himself, not paying attention to Tatsuki as he held his hands in a tiger seal and looked at them. Well, he did manage to actually do it to me once, I wonder. Therefore it is an effective combat technique. As he did this, Tatsuki was taking the lapse in Gaara's attack to catch her breath behind the cover of a boulder. As she looked around the edge of it she no longer saw Gaara where he had been standing the entire time before this. Huh. Where did he go? You really shouldn't let your opponent get behind you all of the time. Tatsuki's eyes widened as she heard that voice behind her, and it made another statement to follow. What did he call it? Oh yes, I forget the full name but, Senengarashi, 1000 Years of Death. A large pair of sand hands from behind Tatsuki flew towards her exposed backside in the form of both the index and middle fingers being held out. The poor girl never knew what hit her. XXX. Elsewhere in the base, Yoruichi was with Urahara and Orihime as they sat in the kitchen. Ah! Orihime jumped out of her chair in shock as the yell from the basement echoed throughout the entire building as clear as day. That was Tatsuki-chan's voice. Do you think she's in trouble? Nah. Yoruichi said dismissively as she calmly sipped at the milk she had procured for herself. Naruto seemed to have a nasty habit of keeping milk in the refrigerator after it spoiled, never really checking to see if it actually was expired before drinking it. That had inspired her to keep her own stash for herself. His little trips to the bathroom, while extremely amusing, also kept everyone else from ever even wanting to touch milk that Naruto had bought if they hadn't seen him buy it that day. It's just training. Gaara won't have as many frills attached to his approach that Naruto does. He's just going ahead with the task assigned to him. It's going to be kind of rough but the instructions were clear. No help. Urahara smirked at Yoruichi as Orihime sat back down, so I have a question. With nobody here having any more than basic medical skills, how do you guys heal after training too hard? Yoruichi shrugged in response, I don't know. We just sleep it off. We're usually busy working instead of training that hard, mostly just for upkeep, and no one's been hurt that badly that it would matter yet. Except for Hidan, but he's fine with it. The guy stabs himself with a spike on a daily basis. Urahara nodded in understanding before tilting his head towards Orihime. So is she a part of this yet like you and I? Yoruichi smiled at how Orihime got nervous at being put on the spot by the former 12th Division captain. She might as well be for as much as she stays around with Tatsuki when she trains. The boys are thinking about it for sure, not sure about Ichigo. I don't see why she doesn't join. The perks for what Naruto would ask you to do are great. She started listing things off on her fingers. You get a wonderful place to stay, apartment with everything, right here for free. Naruto will pay you for what you do, and he pays well. Definitely. Urahara said with a grin that he hid his face behind his fan. Do you know what he shells out just for the Gigai he asked me for? Not to mention paying me to actually do the research on Arankar, something I probably would have done anyway. The guy has the deepest pockets for someone that doesn't act like it. Yoruichi picked up where Urahara cut her off from, and he'd never make you do a mission you didn't want to do, nor would he make you do something he wouldn't go do himself. Man, I feel like a recruiter or something. She said with a laugh. I'll join. Orihime said, laughing as well, settling down to keep explaining, if I didn't then my powers wouldn't be any good for anyone except for me, right? I want to help. Yoruichi put her milk down and clapped her hands together. Very good. Now like I said, you get a place to stay here for free. You can keep living at your apartment that you have now, but you could move here if you wanted to. And don't worry about waiting to do anything until we tell Naruto. He'll be happy that you joined. This is going to be fun. Finally I have another girl in the group to talk to. What about Ururu? Urahara mentioned. Is she even here? Yoruichi countered immediately. She's at the shop with Jinta and Tessai. He answered as if it were obvious. Why? Yoruichi placed her cheek in her hand with a smirking look on her face that if she currently had a tail anyone watching would swear it was waving slowly. Yes, but that's not here though, is it? And what am I really going to talk about with a little girl Kazuki? Urahara frowned and stroked his stubbly chin. Point taken. And on that note I need to go back to the shop to check on things. Hopefully Jinta didn't destroy some of the things I have in storage again. He stood up from his seat and looked around the large eating area before he voiced his current thought. Is it just me or do things feel weird tonight? I mean, something just feels off and I can't explain it. I feel anxious. Yoruichi narrowed her eyes as she was able to sense something off as well coming from outside. It's not just you, she said as she stood up and headed to the basement. I need to go get Gaara. XXX. In the moonlit skies over Karakura town, a garganta opened up to reveal Tucson Kanami leading Zale Aporo Grants and Tia Harabel along with her Frashin. You all know what to do. The former Shinigami captain said, it's time to let our enemies know just who they are dealing with. Zale floated off on his own. I think I will go and gather some research while we're here. Aizen-sama has expressed interest in a few special cases. I want to see what is so important about them. Very well. Tucson said, his blindfolded eyes unable to take in the sight of his Arankar underling leaving. And you, he said, looking at Harabel. She nodded, knowing what his directions would be even before he spoke to her. I will show them the strength of the Espada, and that their resistance is a futile measure. She said before disappearing in a sonido along with her Frashin. With his subordinates off to get to work on their tasks, Tucson simply stood there in the sky listening to the quiet old industrial district, waiting on the fireworks to begin. XXX. Harabel eventually came to a stop in the air, as if she were waiting for something. Her Frashin who were following behind her came to a stop as well, wondering why she had done such. Apache spoke up. Why did we? Harabel held her hand up to get her to be quiet before she seemingly spoke to someone who wasn't there. I am aware of you watching our movements. You cannot hide your power from me. Even when you have it concealed the way that you do right now, it is still very noticeable. In his own burst of sonido, Gaara appeared in front of her, now outside of his Gigai with his Zanpakuto claw-looking spear on his back. He was still dressed in his desert garb, the white robe and the long beige scarf around his neck. I am still not used to concealing my power while I am awake. He said as he stood there with his arms crossed over his chest, the clothing that you all wear. You are in league with this, Aizen Sosuke, person that Naruto has informed me of, are you not? Uzumaki Naruto told you this. Harem asked, just as calmly as Gaara said, getting a nod from him, then yes I am. Why do you choose to fight against Aizen-sama's ambition? You are fighting against your fellow Arankar, why? For a friend. Gaara said simply, the ambition of a megalomaniac holds no interest for me. I do not care about my existence as an Arankar, it is just a meaningless label. There is no source of pride or disdain when I think of what I am simply Sabaku no Gaara and that is that. I have been given another opportunity to defend those that are close to me and this time I will not fail. Harem nodded, but in her mind something else ran through it. Once again this Uzumaki Naruto, who came out of nowhere, got the trust of the Gote 13, made an enemy of Aizen, and now obtained the assistance of a clearly powerful Arankar in seemingly no time at all. I am Tia Harem. I am aware of this. Gaara said, surprising her. Naruto oftentimes comments on how our enemies are not all evil. You are the prime example that he uses when he speaks of such. He drew his spear from his back, pointing the claws at her. However, if you are here under the orders of Aizen, I must defeat you. Prepare yourself. Harem's fraction all went to their weapons to provide assistance when Harem stopped them. Do not interfere. She ordered, can you not feel the power he is trying to hide? This opponent is beyond your level to deal with. Even all three of you would more than likely fall by his hand. She gestured away. You have your own objectives to concern yourselves with. Make our presence known to our enemies. She said, more or less shooing them away. With the absence of her underlings, Harem drew her Zanpakuto. Now that is out of the way, let us begin. She said before lunging forward to attack Gaara, who stood in place. Gaara lifted his spear forward and spun around in a full circle before lunging at her, using his momentum to further power his stabbing motion. The female Arankar dodged to the side of the stab and came on down the line, intending to take her advantage as she saw it and cut Gaara down. With one hand, Gaara grabbed her wrist, stopping her from finishing her attack and cutting his head off. Gaara's emotionless green eyes stared at her as his hand shook violently in his attempt to hold her back. You are very powerful. Gaara said before letting go of her hand and getting away from her attack. When I went into hibernation there was only one hollow I would say had strength comparable to yours, my most bitter enemy. It seems I slept for far too long. I am an Espada. Harem said informatively, one of the top 10 ranked Arankar in Aizen-sama's army. I would certainly hope that I am considered to be strong. However, you are still holding back and I personally find that quite offensive. She began to generate her spiritual power to the point where it was clearly visible, being yellow in color. Gaara reset himself in his basic stance with his spear. It is not my intention to offend you. Gaara said as he started releasing his own power as well. I am just unused to fighting battles. I haven't fought at full strength in 2,000 years. Now would be the time to shake the cobwebs off, I guess. Gaara's Reiatsu was also yellow, but a duller tone and was wispy, flickering away from his body like sand being blown in the wind. Sorry to keep you waiting. XXX. Hello Yoruichi. Tucson said as he ducked a powerful swinging kick that was intended for his head. He jumped away from the attack and faced her down, drawing his Zanpakuto. I wish I could say it was good to see you, but you and I both know that I am blind. Yoruichi stood on the air staring down one of Aizen's top conspirators with a hand on her hip. Hello Tucson. I wish I could say it was good to see you as well, but I missed my kick. She quipped impatiently. She didn't want any banter with someone like him, she just wanted to defeat him and be done with the whole thing altogether. His different look from the last time she saw him, what with him wearing a sleeveless form of the white uniform that she figured was par the course for Aizen's forces, the see-through blindfold around his eyes, and his hair with his braids all let down showed her that he was serious about his betrayal of the Gote 13. Tucson smirked. Well, I could hear you. My other senses are far greater than a normal Shinigame's, as you should know. I don't need to be able to see you, and the slightest noise, such as your clothing ruffling, is enough for me. Tucson then disappeared and reappeared right behind her in a split second. However, he didn't bother attacking, merely standing there until Yoruichi's form faded from existence. So that's your Yutsusemi, Cicada. He said in an interested manner. I didn't think I would be able to feel the difference between the presence of you and one of your afterimages. Well, it's good to know if nothing else. Yoruichi said, as she stood back in front of Tucson, staying the way the battle had begun, with the two at a temporary stalemate. I don't understand why you would do what you did to the Soul Society, but I don't care. He wasn't fast enough to keep up with her, it's not going to change a thing. Tucson scoffed at the way Yoruichi spoke, as if he were the villain. Shihuan Yoruichi, perhaps the most legendary assassin in the history of the Seraiti, of course someone like you would know nothing of justice. You're merely a tool, someone points at a target meant to be rid of and you perform the job. Someone like you follows no path, not that of justice nor corruption. Yeah, Yoruichi said with a sly grin, I'm pretty neutral until someone gives me a reason not to be. Her grin dropped and she flared her reiatsu threateningly. Aizen's dumbass plan and the fact that you're going along with it is plenty of reason for this weapon to be pointed at you and yours. She growled out before using her notorious speed to get in a hit on Tucson that sent him flying to the ground below. Hitting him even just one time felt good, as Tucson wasn't known for being durable and able to take a beating. By her count she wouldn't have to work too hard to beat him as far as putting the boots to him went. That one punch probably crumbled his insides. As he fell to the ground, Tucson rolled in the air to get his feet under him and landed in the street, cracking the pavement with the force he hit the ground with due to how hard Yoruichi hit him. His legs wobbled underneath him as he spoke to her. Real justice would never appeal to someone like you, Shihuan. You need chaos far too much, just like your lover Uzumaki. He's a killer, more of one than possibly even Zaraki Kenpachi. He likes the bloodshed, the violence. Fighting is what he lives for, what he clings to. He is a tainted being. Yoruichi glared down at Tucson, her fists shaking as she heard him talk down about Naruto. He didn't need any more of someone else doing that. He did it enough about himself. Flashback. 4 days ago. Yoruichi lay naked in the bed in Naruto's quarters with a satisfied look on her face, covered by his bedspread. Yeah, about that clone we were talking earlier about you leaving, I think you spoil me too much for a clone to be enough. Naruto laughed as he got himself dressed in his school uniform. Trust me, as long as you didn't do something like hit it too hard or bite it hard enough to draw blood it would be enough. He shook his head with a fond look on his face. I swear I don't get what it is you see in me, Yoruichi-chan. I mean, first of all, I'm older than you. Way older than you. Yoruichi let out a noise that sounded something akin to a purr before she spoke. I'd like to call you experienced, more than anything else. She said with a predatory smile that she wished she could have acted on at the moment. Alas, Naruto had to take Gaara to school and they were already probably late, so what they had already done would have to wait for now. Naruto sat down on the bed and grabbed his socks and shoes to place on his feet as Yoruichi's fingertips began to dance along his back. I'm serious. I don't know how you can stand trying to be with me. You know what I am, what I've done, how long I've been doing it for. He placed his shoes on the ground to step into and stopped to look at his hands. Sometimes I'm glad that I can't die naturally and that it's going to take one hell of a fight for anyone to actually kill me. Yoruichi sat up in the bed, holding the sheets over her chest to cover her modesty, as if it mattered at this point. Why? I mean, I know that you've been alive for so long that it would be a major shift, but it would be okay. If you were to die you would wind up being a Shinigami so fast it would be like you just moved. As if you just decided to live in the Soul Society instead of here. Let's be honest here, Yoruichi-chan. Naruto said as he finished tying his shoes, if I died I wouldn't go to the Soul Society. I would probably go to hell. I've killed so many people, Yoruichi-chan. No matter what I do I always end up fighting for some reason. And as much as I say I value peace, if there were no more battles to be fought, no more conflict in the world, then I wouldn't know what to do with myself. One of the only times I even feel alive anymore is on the battlefield. Hearing that brought a frown to Yoruichi's face. Naruto, no one else thinks of you that way. It wasn't that Naruto had low self-esteem by any stretch of the imagination, he bordered narcissism on a regular basis with how much he believed that he could do anything. For an example, he was planning on building an entire organization from the ground up with the intent to defend Karakura town and whatever else with whatever he could recruit for himself. Is fighting the only thing that makes you feel alive? No, there are a few other things that make me feel alive. Naruto said, standing up and walking towards the door. He turned around and gave her a brilliant smile that made her heart skip a beat. You certainly do for sure. He took a moment to just look at Yoruichi in his bed, and for some reason his gaze made her feel absolutely beautiful. He then left the room and shut the door behind him. Alright Gaara, it's time to go. Finally. Gaara replied tersely from a distance, you are absolutely depraved, did you know that? I heard all of that by the way. Flashback end. Yoruichi spoke to her blind but dangerous enemy in a calm but edgy manner. If he's a tainted being then I'm right there along with him, and I couldn't be any happier about it. People doing what Tucson planned to do alongside Aizen didn't get to say such things about Naruto. She didn't even like hearing him say such things about himself. How someone grew on her so much in just over 4 months she didn't know and she didn't care. Tucson didn't respond, he simply held up his sword. Nake, Suzumushi, cry, cricket. With his Zanpakuto's Shikai release command, a piercing, high-pitched noise hit Yoruichi's ears, forcing her to cover her ears in a futile attempt to block out the noise. I need to get away from that damned noise. Yoruichi thought before quickly backpedaling with her shunpo to get herself as far away from the noise as she could. Hado number 54. High-end Way of Destruction number 54. Abolishing Flames. An oblong blast of purple energy flew through the air at Yoruichi, hitting her body and incinerating it on contact with her. I missed her again. Tucson said quietly to himself before jumping back as an axe kick from Yoruichi put a hellish crater into the street where her foot landed, but you didn't get away unscathed, did you? Damn him and his stupid senses. Yoruichi no longer had on her orange long-sleeved overshirt as she had to cast it aside to avoid being caught on fire by Tauzen's last Kido. Instead she had on the backless, sleeveless shirt she wore underneath her orange top. Her shoulder had a slight burn on it and she had a trickle of blood coming from her ears, but other than that she was okay. He could probably smell my shirt burn when I got away. Tucson waved his sword in front of him slowly. You are just as fast as they say, Yoruichi. Let's see how fast that truly is. Suzumushi Nishiki. Benihiko Cricket second movement. Crimson Flying Locusts. The sword vibrated momentarily before he moved the blade around him in a circle, a trail appearing from the path he made. The trail turned into hundreds of blades that rained down on Yoruichi. Showing her speed once again in a necessary manner to survive, Yoruichi dodged all of the blades that came her way, gritting her teeth as she decided to close the distance between herself and him, grabbing one of the fallen blades and pulling it from the ground to hurl back up at Tucson. Seeing the blade coming with his ability to see, by sensing spiritual power, Tucson avoided impalement by way of his own weapon only for Yoruichi to appear behind him, her arm extended with her palm out, a red orb of energy in it. Hado number 31. Shakuho, Way of Destruction number 31. Red Fire Cannon. A red pillar of energy flew from the orb and hit Tucson full contact, knocking him back into the side of a nearby building right through the wall. I know he's not done yet and neither am I. Yoruichi said to herself as she pointed her palm at the hole in the wall where she knew Tucson had gone and began an actual incantation since to her knowledge he hadn't moved from where he landed. Sprinkled on the bones of the beast. Sharp tower, red crystal, steel ring. Move and become the wind, stop and become the calm. The sound of warring spears the empty castle. In Yoruichi's palm, yellow electric energy formed into an orb that crackled with power. Hado number 63. Reikohu, Way of Destruction number 63, Thunder Roar Seer. The attack was fired from her hand in a massive strike of energy that blew apart the inside of the building she had been aiming into. Yoruichi covered her eyes as the debris from her last Kido kicked back at her by way of the backdraft. How terrible a weakness that must be. Yoruichi's eyes widened as a heavily injured Tucson walked out of the wreckage Yoruichi had just created, to have to protect one's eyes for fear of losing your sight. Luckily I don't have that disadvantage as I have never had my sight to lose in the first place. Tucson held his sword up and put his other hand on the ring that was attached to the guard of his blade. Bankai, Suzumushi Tsushiki, Enma Korogi Cricket Final Form, Devil Cricket. The ring on Tauzen's guard began spinning rapidly. Around Yoruichi and Tucson, the ring expanded in spiritual energy and split into 10 glowing ones. They then flew outward and formed a large black dome that was anchored to the ground around the two combatants. Within the dome Yoruichi could no longer see. It was pitch dark, and though she hadn't noticed it yet, she could no longer smell or hear a single thing. Grr, this is so not good. I'm a total. She wound up getting cut across her back harshly and dropped to the ground before rolling and escaping a follow-up attack for the moment. I'm a total sitting duck. XXX. Tatsuki was running through the empty streets of the old industrial district. Naruto's base was set in the middle of with Orihime following her close behind. Tatsuki-chan, where are you going? We were supposed to stay at the base until everyone came back. But what if they need our help? Tatsuki argued in return. I felt more than just two people show up in Karakura town. Yoruichi and Gaara are outnumbered. Hey, they heard a brash voice scoff. And what exactly are two weaklings like you going to do to help anyone? They both looked up into the sky to see three women, Mila Rose, Sun Sung, and Apache, all standing there looking down at them. Apache smirked and kept speaking. You're strong enough to see us though. I wonder how useful either of you are in a fight. You are supposed to be our enemies after all. Tatsuki immediately dropped into a fighting stance while Orihime stood at the ready to do whatever was needed with her powers. The three women floated down to the ground in front of them, all looking at them in amusement. Mila Rose let out a laugh. Isn't that cute? These two humans think that just because they can see us they can fight us. Tatsuki tried to put up a confident front, but she could feel their reiatsu. While it was a far cry away from anything Gaara produced that day, or even what Naruto did himself to get her used to the oppressive feeling of fighting someone stronger than her, she could feel that these women were stronger than her. Still, it was fight or run, and she knew that if they ran she wouldn't get far as long as they could sense her, and she hadn't gotten around to learning how to staunch her chakra so that others couldn't sense her as easily yet. A good sensor would find her regardless. It's not just the two of us. Tatsuki said, making the ram, snake, and tiger seals that Naruto taught her for one of her techniques. Not anymore, it isn't. Bunshin no Jutsu, clone jutsu. The three freshmen of Harem went wide-eyed when they saw 10 copies of Tatsuki standing in front of them. Since when could humans do that? No one ever told them of anyone with special abilities like that outside of the one blonde human, the banished Shinigami, and the crazy Arankar guy that they had come into contact with in Hueco Mundo not too long ago. That was kind of something that you needed to tell people before you sent them somewhere to do anything. Orihime looked at the copies of Tatsuki with a smile on her face as she was prepared to back her up. Finally getting over the small surprise at seeing a human with some fight in them, Mila Rose was the first of the Arankar attack squad to speak up with confidence. So what? It doesn't matter if there's 1 or 10 ants, they'll all be crushed in the end. She said as she drew her broadsword styles on Pakuto. The copies of Tatsuki narrowed their eyes at the remark and prepared an attack as there was no way she was going to let any of these people harm her best friend as long as she was there. This is what I've been trying to train for, isn't it? All 10 of them ran forward much to the growing amusement of her opponents. Apache laughed as she stepped forward and formed red bullets around both of her fists. You're certainly making this easier than it needs to be, aren't you? She asked before throwing punches that kept firing the blasts, ball, hollow bullet. As the attacks flew rapidly at all of the Tatsukas and hit them, they faded from existence one by one until the last one was actually knocked back by the attack. Apache was about to taunt her again when Tatsuki's body was enshrouded in a puff of smoke, a piece of cracked debris falling to the ground in her place. What? Koden Zanshin, solitary sacred cutting shield. Apache narrowly avoided the small flashing projectile that flew at her from Orihime and turned to glare at the girl, prepared to attack her for trying to catch her off guard. Dynamic entry. Tatsuki used her clones and a substitution as a diversion to get an attempt at a blindside attack that Orihime assisted heavily with. As she jumped through the air, intent on planting the sole of her shoe against Apache's face, Mila Rose appeared in front of her and grabbed her foot with one hand, only taking one step backward to brace herself for the impact. What was that supposed to be? Mila Rose taunted, even if I'd let that hit someone as weak as Apache. Apache then growled angrily at the jibe from her Amazonian-looking partner. There's no way that would have been enough to beat her. You're wasting our time, she said before throwing Tatsuki aside effortlessly. Tatsuki was able to back handspring and get her feet back under her, but felt like kicking herself for overlooking the other two. As if they would actually let things go one-on-one, especially after the assist from Orihime. Sung Sun laughed with her hand in front of her mouth. Still, for Apache to even be caught in a situation like that by a human. What does that say about her? Apache glowered at jokes being sent her way from both of her teammates and looked angrily at Orihime and Tatsuki. I'll tell you what it says that those two are dead right about now. At the tip of the horn on her head that was a part of her mask fragment, a red beam formed, Sero, hollow flash. The beam then fired directly at the two human girls. Tatsuki grit her teeth and prepared to move before she realized that Orihime was still there as well. What am I going to do about this? Come on, think. Santin Keshun, 3 sacred link shields, I reject. A clear yellow triangle shield appeared in front of both Orihime and Tatsuki that blocked the Sero that had been fired at them. Tatsuki marveled momentarily at Orihime's defensive ability, looking at her only to get a smile in return. I'm no good at fighting, but I can be a good shield, I think. Tatsuki then smiled at her in return. Then I guess I really will have to get stronger, so I can do the fighting for the both of us. Apache blinked in shock at the two girls winding up unscathed after her Sero. Just who the hell are they? Friends of ours. A stoic voice said before grunting in effort as a blast of energy flew at the 3 Arankar women, forcing them to dodge. They turned to see Chad with his right arm outstretched from throwing his punch. Orihime, Tatsuki, are you two okay? Orihime nodded fervently. Yes, Sato-kun, we're just fine. How did you find us? Chad began to walk over to them, still keeping his eyes on his apparent enemies. We could feel the Reiatsu generating around this area of Karakura town. It was easy to find. We? Tatsuki asked with a raised eyebrow before another presence made itself clear to them all. How she had missed such a powerful aura she attributed to the gravity of the situation she had been in until just then. Ichigo. Yep. In a blur, Ichigo appeared in front of them all, facing Harabel's Frashin. Sorry it took so long, I was kind of way on the other side of town. His eyes also never left the trio of Arankar that he could see floating above them. I guess that these are the enemies that Naruto tried to warn us about. He was still in his Bankai form from his meeting with Naruto, and the overwhelming Reiatsu flowing from his body was something that couldn't be ignored. Apache hissed out a whisper to her partners. Oh, now who the hell are these guys? That big guy almost actually hit us. Sung Sun wasn't paying Chad any mind, however, choosing to pay attention to Ichigo. Never mind him. The other one, the one with the spiky orange hair, can you not feel that level of strength? On the ground, Ichigo was already sufficiently warmed up by his little fight with Naruto and his rush all the way to the old industrial district. Needless to say, he was ready for another fight. So are you just going to stand up there and gawk all day, or are we actually going to do this anytime before midnight? Now that's the kind of attitude I like to hear, kid. The sound of that excitedly manic voice alerted everyone's attention to Hidan in his Arankar form, black cloak with red clouds standing above them with his scythe in hand. His body was radiating the same terrifying power that the 3 women had felt when he first underwent his transformation. An evil grin on his face, Hidan descended down closer to the level of Harabel's Frashin. Well, now I'm glad we had to come back. I would have kicked my own ass if I'd missed this little party. Did you girls miss me? Apache shook off her shock at seeing Hidan. It doesn't matter if he has all of that power, he doesn't know how to use it. We can still kick his ass. Hidan cackled wildly. I'm an old hand at killing. It's all I'm good at. All I needed was enough time to figure out how to best use the power for that reason. His dark purple Reiatsu started emitting from his body. Who dies first? Fuck you. Apache yelled at him, charging up another Sero at her horn. The only one who's going to die here is you. Hidan licked his lips as he made a half-tiger seal and held out his free hand, building up a purple Sero there as well. I would absolutely love to see you try. Sero, hollow flash. XXX. Gaara vs. Harabel. All across the sky, Gaara and Harabel clashed weaponry. As of yet, Gaara hadn't been able to strike home with his intimidating-looking spear, nor had Harabel been able to deal with the range that Gaara's weapon gave him that went along with his skill at using it. Harabel backed off enough to charge a yellow beam of power in the hollow portion of her Zanpakuto, Ola Azul blue wave gun. She fired the blade-shaped energy projectile directly at Gaara. Gaara merely stabbed his Zanpakuto out towards Harabel's attempted attack, Tanuki no Sume Claw of the Tanuki. The blade of Gaara's spear detached from the pole it was at the head of and flew towards Harabel's yellow blade of energy, immediately disintegrating on contact, not slowing it down in the least. What was the point of that? Harabel wondered as she watched Gaara narrowly dodge her attack, letting it smash into a building below and demolish it. He had to know that his blade was weaker than my technique. What she didn't see were the granules of sand that comprised Gaara's blade reforming behind her in the shape of the claw it had been. Before it could bear down and strike her, Harabel dodged it in a burst of sonido, only to come to a stop and find Gaara above her, his now staff-like Zanpakuto held above his head for a downward swing that she had to life her own Zanpakuto to block with a resounding clang noise. As she blocked Gaara's attack, the claw flew towards the air behind her, trying to stab into her while she was busy with Gaara himself. Harabel tossed her Zanpakuto to the other hand and grabbed the pole arm of Gaara, using her sword hand to swat away his tanuki claw only for it to disintegrate into sand again. Is it solid or isn't it? She thought, and her answer came when the sand moved and grabbed a hold of her Zanpakuto arm. I apologize for this, Gaara said, getting her attention. He had taken one of his hands off of his own Zanpakuto and had it held out to the side as if he were reaching out to grab something. Sabaku Susup Sand Waterfall Funeral. The sand around Harabel's hand imploded and crushed her arm in a rain of blood. Gaara was surprised when her eyes barely even registered the damage that she had taken. What a strong will to not even cry out at such an injury. Harabel was able to free her now useless arm that hung limp at her side and snatched her Zanpakuto before it could fall with her other arm that was still good. I don't need both arms to defeat you. Why do you not fight at full strength? Why don't you? Gaara asked in return, his spearhead reforming on the tip of his staff where it had been originally. My reason is simple. My resurrection is too dangerous to use anywhere near populated areas or around those too weak to bear the amount of power it generates simply from its release. I would potentially harm my allies with it. Their conversation was cut short when Hidan's Reiatsu spiked over in the distance. Oh. It looks like Hidan has returned. Harabel narrowed her eyes in the indicated direction as that was where her fraction had been dispatched. There were two towering powers coming from that direction that she was certain they wouldn't be able to handle. It seems our battle has come to an end for now, she said before disappearing with a low booming noise. XXX. Rooftop of Naruto's base. Nell jumped around excitedly as she waited by her two brothers, Dondochaka and Peshi. What's happening? What's happening? She asked excitedly. All over the normally lifeless district, the power fluctuations of constant battle could be felt. Peshi started, scratching his head. There's a lot of fighting and, yeah. A lot of fighting. Cool. Nell exclaimed. Who's winning? Peshi waited a moment before answering confidently, the stronger side of course. Yep. No question about that, the stronger people are totally winning right now. An arrogant-sounding voice sounded behind them as someone floated down to the surface of the roof. Well, Neliel tu Odelschwenk. To find you here of all places. Peshi and Dondochaka turned around slowly to see the pink-haired Arankar with glasses standing there smirking. Zale Aporo grants. How do you know Nell's name? Nell asked nervously, fully aware of how strong this individual was, just from his mere presence. What do you want with Nell? Zale looked at the crack in the mask on Nell's head and spoke. Of course you wouldn't be able to remember anything as you are. The attack all those years ago gave you amnesia as well as took your power. A grin came over his face. I did want to study such an effect back when it happened to you, and an opportunity like this won't just fall into my hands again. Come with me if you would, my dear. Dondochaka stood protectively in front of Nell, keeping Zale away from her as best he could. You won't touch any part of her, you bastard. Zale laughed at the attempt of the two other Arankar protectors. Do you really think you two can possibly keep me from taking Neliel? It must be nice to be so delusional. All of a sudden he heard the door to the roof open up, prompting him to turn his head. You. Naruto walked up the stairwell leading to the roof and stood there, staring at Zale with a frown on his face. Well, we missed our flight, but I have to say that it was probably a good thing that Hidan can't drive for shit. His frown deepened thinking about the harrowing experience of being a passenger. He crashed the car 20 miles outside of town. We weren't even halfway there yet. Naruto rubbed his neck and disappeared before delivering a crushing kick to Zale that sent him flying off of the rooftop. Anyway, I'm pissed. And seeing you try to pick on a cute little Arankar like Nell pisses me off even more. Zale caught himself in the air and touched his lip where blood was flowing from. He angrily drew his Zanpakuto as he stared down at Naruto. You were the reason I came here to begin with. Such an interesting rumor about you I've heard from Aizen-sama. You're supposed to be nothing more than a regular human and yet your Reiatsu is so intense at the moment. You're worth studying. Catch me if you can then. Naruto said, gesturing towards himself, it's going to be harder than you think to take me alive. Alive? Dead? It doesn't matter. Zale shrieked maniacally, a body to study is a body to study. He said as a garganta opened as multiple other Arankar poured out of it, now attack him my fraction. And they did, dropping from the sky around Naruto preparing to do such. Naruto stood there, calmly counting them out on his fingers, having to use one hand twice to get them all counted before shrugging and cracking his neck. Okay, here we go. Jinchuriki style. Naruto's body was then covered in the same dark flame-looking chakra that he took on when he fought Ichigo's hollow earlier. Let's make this quick. Naruto reached up with his arm and from it, the arm of a giant, made from his dark chakra stretched out into the air and grabbed all of them tightly, crushing them almost effortlessly. He looked back at Nell and her brothers, get off of the roof. And they wasted no time in doing just that, leaving Naruto to face Zale alone. Zale cared not for the deaths of his underlings as a grin came over his face at the sight of Naruto. What a glorious form. Such incredible power, what is its source? I need to know what this is. Tell me. An inferior being such as a human like you has no right claiming such power. Naruto looked up at the man as he began to rant madly about Naruto's power. Well, you say that like it was my choice. And the source of my power is a need-to-know basis. I don't feel like telling that to someone that's about to die here. Arrogant human. Zale said as he held up his Zanpakuto, Susur, Fornicaris, Sip, lewd concubine. He said, activating his resurrection as he swallowed the weapon. A glow then emitted from his mouth before his body began to swell up. Naruto made a step forward to take advantage, but Zale's body then emitted spiritual energy that kept him back, obscuring his vision and keeping him back. As Naruto found himself able to look upon Zale again, he found that his appearance had changed. His lower body was a multitude of purple tentacles with his feet extending from the bottom. They were then covered by a dress-looking garment. His upper body had on a tight gray shirt with white sleeves that had purple extensions flowing from them like teardrops. His hollow mask took the form of a headdress on the sides of his head, extending across his forehead and under his eyes. The ends of his hair were purple as well, and his hands became white with the tips of his fingers becoming purple. His left eye gained purple line markings. On his back there were 4 large branch-looking structures with many red strands hanging from them. Take a look. Zale said after his transformation was complete, take a look at perfection. Naruto stared at him and blinked once. Okay, I've seen it. Now what? In response, Zale released a large amount of black liquid from his body that flew at Naruto from upwards. Naruto's eyes widened as he didn't see how he was going to dodge that much liquid from above him, and not knowing what it was made him not want to risk being hit by it. Naruto flared up his chakra and produced a solid black orb around his body that disintegrated the liquid on contact. When the orb disappeared, it revealed that Naruto was no longer there, having left through a hole in the roof. Zale's eyes widened and the red strands on his branches expanded to cover his body defensively just as Naruto attacked him from behind, holding a black sphere of chakra in his hand that expanded to twice his size. Inten. Cho-Odama Rasengan, Yin Release. Super Great Ball Spiraling Sphere. Naruto slammed the jutsu into his enemy's body and around them a whirling torrent of black energy formed, impossible for anyone to see into, before Zale exploded out of it, landing into the side of a building, his branches on his back destroyed. Gah! What did you do? I blocked with my wings and my hierro. How did that get through them both? Naruto's right arm was uncovered, without any of his chakra shroud over it for a moment until it covered his arm again. That jutsu manipulated the shroud around my body into an attack, concentrated enough to plow through anything. This is the strongest, densest chakra in the entire world bar none. It can break through anything. I am the Octava Espada. The 8th strongest in Aizen-sama's army. In my resurrection state you shouldn't be able to even come close to me. With his wings destroyed, Zile's greatest weapon was gone. If he couldn't catch Naruto in one of them and perform his technique, he couldn't win, you worthless peon. He disappeared in a burst of sonido and reappeared at Naruto's back with his hand in a knife strike position. Die. He thrust it forward, fully expecting to pierce Naruto's chest, only to find that he didn't get past his black chakra shroud. What? Someone as weak as you can't ever hope to get past my chakra shroud. Naruto instructed him, a tail extending from the shroud and grabbing a hold of Zale tightly. Now that I know who the enemy is, and now that I know that you're willing to destroy at the very least thousands to get what you want, I don't have to hold back anymore. You remind me of someone from my past now that I think about it. He turned his head to the side, allowing Zale to see him grinning manically. I always wanted to do something like this to him. You won't finish me, you fool. Zale thought to himself, my final technique can activate as long as you are touching me, and you are. He tried to initiate it only to find that he could not. What? Why? He's grabbing me. He then scrutinized the chakra shroud and gasped, this isn't a part of your physical body at all, is it? It's a part of your chakra, or whatever you call it. Yep. Naruto said, because I really don't want to touch you, so I won't. Kei's no Yaiba blade of wind. From Naruto's fingertips, an invisible blade materialized in a gust and cut right through Zale once. Naruto let his chakra shroud fade, turning him back to normal as Zile's bifurcated body fell to the ground. Naruto stared at the two pieces of his body as he thought, so he was number 8, was he? What number was that Harem girl? And how strong are the other numbers? XXX. Yoruichi vs. Tucson. One would think that the lack of sight, smell, and sound would completely adversely affect someone in battle. Normally it would. It would affect a fighter that wasn't already somewhat trained in dealing with it. As the former leader of the Onmitsukido, Yoruichi was trained to defend herself and even win battles without her sight. The lack of hearing and smell that came with Tauzen's Bankai was a problem, but not one that she couldn't deal with. She still had the feeling of touch. With as fast as she was, if she could feel when he might attack her, she could avoid it. Yoruichi was far faster than Tucson. Thus she was able to survive the battle thus far, until she got lucky and unleashed a sweeping kick that nailed Tucson right in the stomach. Yes. Got you, you slippery sack of crap. The dome then faded. Why? She had no clue. It was a glancing blow, but she'd be damned if she wasn't going to take advantage of it and finish things here. As she prepared to activate Shunko, she looked around to find Tucson back in the sky. You're running away. I forget. You can't sense anything while my Bankai is active. Tucson said as a garganta opened. I'm not going to tell you anything other than this isn't over, Shihuan Yoruichi. He said that, but thought something to himself as he held back the internal injuries that Yoruichi's kick gave him. I wonder if Aizen-sama is willing to bestow a power on me greater than my Bankai. Yoruichi took a moment to sense things around her and found that Naruto and Hidan's signatures were back in Karakura town. As the sky closed on Tucson, she narrowed her eyes at him and nursed her numerous cuts. You're damn right this isn't over, we never even got started. XXX. Hidan held his scythe in his hand and looked at the three female Arankar that he had been familiar with before tonight. Hey Shinigami kid. He said, addressing Ichigo, do you mind if I take all three of them myself? We've got something of a thing going on. Besides, I've got something I want to test out. He grabbed the pike that hung around his neck and extended it, pointing at his chest. My resurrección. He's going to use his resurrección. Sung Sun, Mila Rose, and Apache thought at the same time. Ichigo scratched his head in confusion as he and all of his friends looked up at Hidan as he asked a question. Sure, but what's a resur whatever you called it? Hidan rolled his eyes. My actual true power, you stupid brat, keep up. He shouted before Harem appeared behind him. As a reflex, Hidan turned around with a wild swing of his scythe, only to miss as Harem dodged him with her sonido to get to her underlings. Oh no you didn't bitch. No one creeps up on me, doesn't stab me for the trouble, and just walks away. Sung Sun looked and Harem's wound with her hand in front of her mouth out of shock. Harem-sama, your arm. A wound that can be treated once we return to Hueco Mundo. Harem insisted stoically, it's time for us to return. Sassoon Harem-chan. Naruto appeared in the sky next to Hidan, using his swift release to get there quickly. We never got to talk. That's kind of disappointing, he said with his arms crossed. Hidan tried to step forward when Naruto's command stopped him. Down boy. Gaara appeared then also. I didn't get to fight. Hidan said indignantly. Come on, what the fuck? Naruto then narrowed his eyes at him. You flipped the damn car over the median. You're lucky I didn't kick your ass all the way back to Karakura town. The only thing that saved you was that we had to run from the cops. Too many questions to answer for a car that wasn't even registered under my name. Hidan retreated back a few feet. He wasn't in his Gigai. Naruto could kill him as he was like this, never mind then. Until next time Uzumaki Naruto. Harabel said, you're as much of a threat as we considered you. You and your allies. With that a Garganta opened and the Espada and her Frashion stepped through it. Naruto watched the portal close and let out a sigh, looking around the somewhat wrecked area, but who cared? No one came around there except him anyway. Well, that's a good job Dream Team. He said in reference to Gaara and Hidan. He descended and landed, very close to Tatsuki as a matter of fact, getting her to step back. Did you hit Gaara? Tatsuki's face took on one of shock. She completely forgot about the test once Gaara left. They had been fighting for 3 hours and she hadn't managed to hit him. Looking down at the ground, she shook her head, unable to look up at him. No, I guess it's back to the beginner stuff huh? Naruto just looked at her before looking over at Gaara. She didn't hit you. Gaara shook his head. Well what about the test part of the exercise? Gaara ignored the look of confusion on Tatsuki's face and walked up to Naruto. Tatsuki fought against the enemy with only the skills you've given her thus far. She did not retreat. In our battle she did the same. She never gave up or faltered. She would have kept going if we weren't alerted to the presence of Aizen's soldiers. Naruto nodded as he took in this information. Well Tatsuki, in that case if Gaara says so then you pass. What? Tatsuki said with a blank look on her face, not understanding why he was passing her, but I didn't hit him. I never even got close to Gaara, so how can you say I passed? Because you were never meant to actually hit Gaara. Naruto said as if it were as plain as day. Ichigo still didn't understand. The test seemed clear. There didn't seem to be any in-between point for hitting Gaara or not hitting him. If Tatsuki didn't get it done then why was she being passed? It was weird. What do you mean? You just said that her test was to hit Gaara. You're a confusing guy Naruto. Naruto chuckled. I gave her an impossible task. At seeing the shock on everyone's face, he elaborated, do you all know how hard it is to lay a single finger on Gaara if he doesn't want you to? Only the fastest, the strongest, or someone with a hell of a lot of tricks to their credit can get past his sand shield when he's in his Gigai. He lifted his fingers and started listing things. Tatsuki, for as good as she is, isn't fast enough to get around it, she isn't strong enough to brute force her way through it, and I only taught her the most basic ninjutsu in existence, none of which are going to fool Gaara on his worst day or give her enough of an opening to touch him. Orihime was lost, way back at the point when Naruto said that Tatsuki passed, so, what was the point of the test? Naruto put a hand on Tatsuki's shoulder. If you had thought that it was impossible, if you had quit before Gaara told you to stop, then I couldn't have trained you any further. That was all to make sure you had enough drive to keep going when my training got hard, and if you didn't then at least you would have a few tricks that might keep you alive if you were attacked. His face was serious as he spoke. Tatsuki-chan, I can work with pretty much anything. I'll be able to make you stronger no matter how good you are or how good you aren't, but the thing that I absolutely can't do anything with is someone that's a quitter. You need guts to do the things we're going to have you doing. And there it was. The point of the test wasn't a measure of her skill, it was a measure of her determination. Complaining about how unfair it was, or giving up in the middle of the test would have resulted in her failure. It was as simple as that. So, Tatsuki said hopefully. Like I said, you pass. Naruto said with a grin on his face, and for the agreement you get a new jutsu, Gaara. He said, expecting Gaara to toss her the scroll he had placed the jutsu on. Gaara shrugged and gestured to his clothing, the scroll is in my Gigai, not with me Naruto. Naruto deflated, the flow of the moment broken up. Oh well, you can give it to her once you get back inside. Me and Hidan need to get going. Why? Ichigo asked. They had just gotten back and now he was going to leave again. Hidan looked away sheepishly while Naruto glared at him and answered the substitute Shinigami. Because of someone's shitty driving we missed our flight, so we have to leave now and get to the airport to get tickets for the next flight out and to make sure we don't miss that flight too. His glare deepened as Hidan hid behind Gaara. I'm driving this time, he asserted with a growl. XXX. Yoruichi sat on the roof of a building as Urahara sat behind her bandaging the wounds she suffered in her fight with Tucson. Urahara grinned widely as he finished the job. So you're not going to go get a quickie from your boyfriend before he leaves again? He tried to tease. Yoruichi just smirked in response, not even bothering to turn around. Please, Naruto's going to leave as fast as he can. And there's really no such thing as a quickie for us. If we started, we wouldn't stop for the rest of the night. She then let out a sigh, and then he'd be late to get back from where he's going. He would miss more than Monday's classes if we did that. So responsible aren't you, Yoruichi? Urahara snickered before getting serious, so what do you think? Yoruichi looked up at the sky, ignoring the moon to look at the area where the Garganta had been opened not too long ago. I think we've got a hell of a lot of work to do. They struck back the same way that we did. They know that they can get to us just as easily as we can get to them, and we're all by ourselves. You have to wonder how quick the Sarites' response would be in the case of an all-out attack against us. Ooh. Urahara said in interest. I smell a field trip. Too bad I can't go though, but I guess there are things I can do here as well, so don't worry about me. Yoruichi let out a laugh. I never do Kazuki. You know that. Omake. Immortals like us. 2 days after leaving Karakura town, Naruto and Hidan were resting atop a cliff in an extremely arid environment, with the silver-haired man holding a pair of binoculars to his eyes. Both of them were wearing desert camouflaged clothing and had automatic rifles on their persons. Why are we here, Uzumaki brat? This seems pointless to me. Naruto, who was sitting back relaxing in preparation for what they were about to do in mere moments, eyed Hidan with a raised brow. What part of 50 million American dollars seems pointless? Calm down, this'll be over in all of 5 minutes. My clones, plus the fact that you can't die in that body will make sure of that. I've been meaning to knock this guy off for like 10 years. Why the fuck didn't you get around to it sooner then? Hidan asked him irritably. He hated desert environments, and having to actually work in one left him crankier than usual. You don't even fucking need me for this. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. I just never got around to it. I was going to let the country he fucked with get him, but it's been 10 years, that means it's my turn. And I don't need you, but we were in the neighborhood, so I figured why not get some easy money while we're here. It's not like these people are shinobi, and the closest thing to a shinobi around here is that military academy we saw. We'll be done by the time they figure out what's up. He pulled the rifle from his back and switched the safety up. Now saddle up, asshole, we have a flight to catch tonight. Hidan sighed and did the same as Naruto, frowning at the noisy weapon. Why can't I just use my scythe? Naruto shook his head. Too many questions to answer, such as, how the fuck did you get close enough to that guy to fuck him up with a scythe? Besides, we need his body in good enough condition to be identified, otherwise we ain't getting paid. Just point and shoot, dumbass, a monkey could use these things. Hidan then smirked. Hence why after thousands of years you're finally acceptable at using them. Feeling satisfied at Naruto's growl, he brought up another point. Yoruichi's going to be pissed off when she finds out why we're late. She's not going to find out we even did this because you're not going to tell her, and neither is anyone else. Naruto commented, confident in that fact. You're going to walk in there, be my human bullet shield, shoot your gun, meanwhile while you miss every shot because you suck'll be hitting them, and eventually I'll empty a clip through the target's chest and we can go home $50 million richer. Hidan nodded, cocking his gun before smiling faintly. Kami, it feels good to do this again. Not with the guns because I hate these stupid things. Naruto nodded in agreement of their distaste in guns, but just this you know. He then shook his good mood off and put the sneer back on his face. Alright, enough sentimental bullshit, let's do this. Alright, remember the plan. Naruto said, you go in towards the front and raise hell. I'll go through the back and they'll be screwed. I can understand their language anyway. You can't, so I can hear how they're going to respond to whatever you do. Where the fuck are we anyway? Hidan asked as they started descending the cliff towards a small community of well-to-do compounds. Pakistan. Naruto said absently. Abbottabad, I think this place is called. Do I have to take this Bin Laden guy alive? Hidan asked again, hoping for a response in the negative. Naruto picked his ear before flicking it and pulling a balaclava over his face. I don't care. We get paid alive or dead. Now lock and load, dickhead. In a lab-like setting inside of Urahara Kisuke's shop, the man himself was seemingly going over the compounded information on Arankar that he had gotten before the death of the Octava Espada Zale Aporo Grants, with Tessai at his side and Yoruichi nearby watching as well. Yep, it's just as I thought, he said with confident finality. What is it? Yoruichi said, snapping out of her trance of sorts. She had been there for over an hour. Her boredom due to Naruto and Hidan being gone on their worldwide excursion for another set of Naruto's possessions, and the fact that Gaara and the new recruits of their little group were all at school led to her coming over to Urahara's place. She could have stayed at the base with the other Arankar that were insistent on staying with them after seeing Naruto destroy an Espada, but they would have driven her insane. Did you find out something new to use against them? Urahara merely grinned and turned from his desk towards his longtime friend. Nope. But seriously, Naruto couldn't have left any of that guy he killed or any of his underlings. I mean, talk about going overboard. He chalked up another mental victory to himself when he saw Yoruichi facepalm. It made him feel good that he could still get under the skin of such a close friend. Yoruichi let out a sigh as she removed her hand from her face. Well, we're supposed to be going to the Soul Society soon. Naruto and I are supposed to go. If Hidan or Gaara went, then I don't want to think about the problems that would probably cause. Well, Gaara might be able to move about in the Soul Society without being bothered as long as she and Naruto vouched for him. Hidan wouldn't, as he would get himself into all kinds of trouble, so they're staying behind in case anyone needs their help or in case another attack happens. Because someone never seems to fight unless there's no other option, she said, finishing with a glare at Urahara. Said man simply opened his fan and hid his face with it. Why would the brains of the operation want to get involved with the fights when there's so much splendid muscle around to do the fighting for him? He said with a certain glee at attempting to earn Yoruichi's ire. Besides Yoruichi, I think all the workouts have been doing you good, because before you started fighting again you were looking a little out of. Shut up right now. Yoruichi said with a deceptive pleasantness in her voice and a sweet smile on her face, because if you think I'm out of shape, what would that make you? By now Tessai had long since vacated the lab. Now Yoruichi, Urahara reasoned, trying to beg off. Maybe he went a step too far in his teasing. Obviously he did, because every step he took backwards was followed by a step forward from Yoruichi. There's all kinds of delicate equipment in here. You don't want to risk destroying any of that, would you? He breathed out a sigh of relief when he saw Yoruichi stop moving towards him. She then vanished behind him in a shunpo and held a tight grip on his shoulder as she began to lead him out of the room, smile still on her face. You're right, Kazuki. It's a good thing that you have that roomy training space downstairs, isn't it? Jinta and Ururu watched Urahara get dragged through the house, a mortified look on his face. Ururu turned to Tessai, who made it none of his business. Is Yoruichi-san going to hurt Mr. Urahara? She asked meekly. Nope. Urahara answered for himself, grinning madly. He pointed in the direction that Yoruichi had stalked off in. Yoruichi's got one of my decoy gigai. Oh Kazuki, Yoruichi yelled through the house in a sing-song voice. I found your little copy can't really take a punch, you're way more durable. And she's not getting me. Urahara finished before taking off running out of his house. Man, I wish I knew how to do that log thing that Naruto can do. XXX. Karakura High School. Ichigo, Chad, Uryu, Orihime, and Tatsuki sat on the roof during lunchtime talking about the events that had occurred recently. So those were the Arankar guys that Naruto warned us about. Ichigo said with a frown on his face. They were just as strong as he said they were, especially that one blonde woman. He mused, referring to Harabel. Naruto really wasn't joking about the new threat at hand. Aizen hadn't just been sitting idle and hiding clearly. Tatsuki, on the other hand, instead of being nervous, was more raring to go than ever. I want Naruto-sensei to get back so I can learn more stuff. I didn't have enough knockout power to fight those things very well at all. You still did really good though, Tatsuki-chan. Orihime insisted cheerfully. You almost got that one that attacked us. If the others hadn't been there you definitely would have kicked her butt. Or you didn't know why he was there. Ever since he had lost his Quincy powers in his battle against Kuritsuchi Mayuri in the Seraiti he wasn't of any use to anyone in battle. Still his viewpoint on the matter might still have been valid enough to contribute. Ichigo, you said Naruto had a way for you to train and get stronger. Why don't you take him up on it? It's clear he's fighting the same enemies that we are, so there would be no advantage for him to lead you astray. Naruto kicked his butt during Ichigo's little test of his character, and he had revealed that he had still been holding back since when he fought the Arankar that attacked Ichigo felt a stronger Reiatsu from Naruto than he had ever felt before. It was staggering. Naruto didn't seem to be the kind of guy to manipulate people into what he wanted them to do. He was more of the type to tell you what you needed to do and then beat it into your head until you did it. It was way more straightforward than Urahara's mind games. Why did he trust Urahara more again? Chad took Ichigo's silence as his chance to speak up. I really think you should, Ichigo. You're the strongest out of all of us. If anyone can help in this fight it's you. The large boy of Mexican heritage then made another point. I won't just be sitting back either. I need to get stronger too. Hearing about how everyone was going to take Naruto's offer for help or whatever he had offered them put a tick mark on Tatsuki's head. Now wait a minute. You're all going to Naruto-sensei for training. That's not fair. You all have powers of your own, I don't have anything. And you want him to teach you how to do more stuff. All I can do is make fake copies of myself, switch places with stuff and turn into other people. Basics killed Tatsuki-chan. Everyone turned their heads to see Naruto standing on the top of the fence surrounding the rooftop. Naruto. They all said, not even sensing his presence as he snuck up on them so thoroughly. Yes, me. Naruto said before hopping down onto the rooftop. I'm back from the lands of shifting sands and I come bearing gifts for my cute little female student. How'd you get up here without anyone noticing you? Ryu asked calmly. Ninja. Naruto said with a deadpan look on his face. I thought we went over this already. I told you guys a million times already. Tatsuki meanwhile, couldn't have cared any less about where the topic of the conversation was going. All she heard was Naruto's opening statement and that was all she needed to hear as far as she had been concerned. Who cares about how he got up here? He said he had a present. What kind of present did you get me? Is it good? Come on Naruto-sensei, what did you bring me? She asked, getting up in his face over the matter, excited at the prospect of getting something cool. Naruto held back a chuckle at her exuberance. Calm down Tatsuki-chan. I got you something good since you don't really like swords or anything and everyone you fight is probably going to have some kind of weapon. He saw her brown eyes light up simply thinking about it. Check it out. He said, pulling out a scroll and summoning a weapon in a puff of smoke. As the smoke cleared, in Naruto's hands he held a pair of blades that looked like brass knuckles with a sharp tooth-like blade at the ends of them. Say hello to the trench knives. Tatsuki squealed in delight and took them from him, trying them on and giving a few test punches. Ichigo just stared at his childhood friend in shock. Did Tatsuki just squeal? I've never heard her make that sound in 10 years of knowing her. Not even once. Ringtone. Naruto said, holding up his cell phone before playing back the recorded sound of Tatsuki squealing happily, or maybe I should make it my text message noise. Yeah, because when people call to talk to me directly it's usually about something bad. This is a happy noise. Tatsuki stopped in the middle of marveling over her new weapons to turn and glare heatedly at Naruto, catching wind of what he was saying. Delete it sensei. There was no way she'd let any sign of her making that damn noise leave this rooftop. She had a reputation to keep. Nope. Naruto replied in amusement. Now give me the trench knives back. He raised an eyebrow when she turned around, keeping them away from him while she stuck her tongue out. You can't carry weapons around for the rest of the day Tatsuki-chan. She scoffed and stuck one of her hands out expectantly. Yes I can. Give me that scroll you sealed them up in. I know how to use it to get the trench knives out. Naruto tossed her the scroll and she showed that she truly was a quick study when it came to learning what Naruto had to teach her. She was picking up the basics extremely quick, but he assumed that already having a combat base got her used to learning new things like this. There you go. I showed you didn't I? Tatsuki said, holding up the scroll with her new weapon sealed inside. Naruto rolled his eyes, whatever. All that shows is that I'm the greatest teacher you've ever had. He turned to the others on the rooftop, so bow down to Uzumaki Naruto's greatness. He said in a grand gesturing pose. I'd rather not. Ichigo said with a dry look on his face, seriously. This was the guy that beat my berserk inner hollow's ass. I definitely need the training. With that in mind, Ichigo raised his hand lamely. Hey. About the training you said I could have. Naruto cut him off with a wave of his hand. Yeah, I'll take you there right after school's over with. You'd better be ready though. With that, Naruto jumped back onto the fence of the roof. Alright, I'll see you guys later. Tatsuki were training like usual today, and like usual everyone else is invited, though I might be a bit late with getting Wonderboy all set up to get his ass kicked. He then stopped abruptly before realizing what he said. Forget that last thing. Actually, you can go ahead and remember it since you are going to get your ass kicked. You knowing about it isn't going to change a thing. Wait. Orihime stopped him before he could jump off of the roof. You aren't going to class. Naruto shook his head. No way. I already missed more than half of the day and I snuck up here. I'm not going in there to get chewed out by a woman 1/100th of my age. Later. With that, he finally jumped off, leaving the teens behind. School is for chumps. They all stood in silence before Chad stood up. I'm glad I met Naruto, because he actually makes me feel normal compared to him. XXX. Naruto's base. Gaara was notoriously the most even-tempered man that most people would ever meet. In his youth he was quick to anger, and with that anger he would kill anyone that looked at him wrong, but now he was as docile as a kitten unless you were trying to kill him, and even then an enemy would get some kind of mercy from him. But the next time Naruto went on a long excursion of some sort, he was definitely going. The reason being that the three strange Arankar that they were now putting up were driving him insane. Although he was the only one that could have put up with them from Friday to Tuesday, Hidan would have probably killed them by then. The former shinobi was sitting in the training facility with sand wrapped around Dondochaka, Peshi, and even Little Nell. I think that we should install some plant life in here. It looks far too much like Urahara-san's training facility for my liking. What do you all think? He asked the group of captured Arankar in his grasp. They couldn't answer, however, due to the fact that he had made sure to cover their mouths with the sand. Sand rat, are you down here? Hidan's loud boisterous voice rang out through the training space. He and Naruto must have returned from wherever it was that they had gone. Whatever they had done must have put Hidan in a good mood. Yes, I am Hidan. Gaara said, letting go of his captives since he was sure that being held by sand for an hour taught them to be more quiet in his presence. He could only take so much yelling and shenanigans, and he had been dealing with them for the entire weekend. Did you all learn a lesson from this? He asked, getting unanimous nods from them. Good. Hidan then appeared on the scene holding a massive calabash-shaped gourd, a huge grin on his face. Check it out. Uzumaki said, this thing is yours. It's fucking huge. For the first time in quite a while, Gaara had an expression of pure surprise on his face. That was his gourd from when he was a ninja. Is this what you and Naruto left to go find? My gourd. Hell yeah. Hidan said, walking over to Gaara and setting the gourd on the ground. He even dropped it over at Urahara's to make it so you could get out of your gigai with it instead of waiting for Uzumaki or someone else to pull you out of it. He pointed at the cork at the top of the gourd that was now emblazoned with a skull marking, the same marking on Hidan's cylindrical container for his pike. Gaara liked it. He could keep much more sand with him stored inside of his gourd when he needed to use his gigai to keep a cover, and he could take it to school with him, claiming it to be a gift from a relative's trip abroad or something. He could come up with a good cover story of why he would lug it around. Hidan walked around Gaara as he wordlessly marveled over his returned gourd. Oh, the trip was so awesome. It was in the desert and I hate the desert, but when we got to Uzumaki's little hiding place it was fucking incredible. Triple layered booby traps and all of that shit, and when we got to his actual armory the place was so fucking stocked up full of stuff. He then looked over at the three other Arankar in the room. Yeah, what are you guys still doing here? We live here now. Peshi said joyfully before realizing that was the wrong answer once Hidan began radiating killing intent. I mean, we're staying here until things clear up in Hueco Mundo. He finished with a nervous laugh. Hidan nodded tensely. That's what I thought you said. At that time, Naruto wound up walking downstairs eating a sandwich. Hidan, stop bullying people that you know you can kill. Naruto said in a chiding manner as he polished off his snack. You saw those guys we fought the other day. How do you think they'll survive in Hueco Mundo with Aizen turning every Urankar into his own private army? That guy Zale Aporo almost tried to take them right then. He then felt a tiny weight slam into his legs and disrupt his balance. But you saved us, Naruto Aniki. Nell said, holding on tightly to Naruto's legs in a hug. Naruto Aniki can probably beat anybody if he beat an Espada like that. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Well, I don't know about da. Actually, yeah, there's no need to be modest here. I'm the greatest. He then began to laugh in a manner reminiscent of Jiraiya as he picked up Nell and put her on his shoulders, much to her enjoyment. Hidan stared at Naruto with a twitching eye. Uzumaki, we are not running a halfway house here. You're going to let these guys stay here. Look at them. They stick out like sore thumbs, and what in the hell can they do that's actually useful? So far all they've done is work our nerves and almost get killed. Gaara appeared at Hidan's side and decided to interject. I believe it has been proven that they serve as excellent bait for allowing us to attack our opponents off guard, but that may be a little too cruel of a fate for them. Thank you for returning my gourd, by the way. He finished, in gratitude to Naruto for the painstakingly achieved gift. Hey! Dondo Chaka protested vehemently. We're not useless, don't you know? We've got tons of information on stuff in Hueco Mundo that you guys don't have any clue about. That got Naruto, Gaara, and Hidan's full undivided attention. Naruto and Hidan both knew nothing about the place, and any kind of insight Gaara had was way outdated. If Dondo Chaka wasn't full of hot air, then something like that had the potential to be incredibly valuable. Next time they went in, they wouldn't just be wandering about blindly. Hell, if they had good enough knowledge on the place, maybe they could make a rudimentary map or something. The possibilities with something like this were huge. Naruto then turned to Hidan with Nell still on his shoulders, and this is why we are good people to everyone we meet, Hidan. Naruto said in a lecturing voice as Nell nodded atop his head, not just because sometimes it's just the right thing to do, but because sometimes the people we help wind up being useful somehow. Check it out, we've got scouts. He then took Nell off his shoulders and held her out, and a cute little mascot. Now that's what I call winning time. Nell laughed from Naruto's outstretched arms and kept repeating, winning time. You're a total bleeding heart, Uzumaki, I swear. Hidan said in defeat. If Naruto wasn't for kicking them out, then the fact of the matter was that they weren't going anywhere. He then found Nell shoved into his arms. What the hell's this? I need to go grab Wonderboy and drop him off at his babysitter's. Naruto said, referencing Ichigo's intended training with the Visoreds. I'll be back a little bit later. Make sure Tatsuki gets warmed up by the time I get back. Gaara and Hidan take them to Urahara's place. That lazy bum is going to work as long as he's on this team. He then left the room in a whirlwind of leaves marking where he had been. You want me to go now? Hidan asked incredulously, as he already knew that the answer was yes. Sometimes he wished Naruto had just left him in that cursed forest he plucked him out of because he hated his new boss. He held Nell up to eye level and gave her a dry look. Sup. Nell then proceeded to tear up and start to cry. Jashin-sama, I hate my job so much. He looked over at Gaara with a glare. You're just loving this, aren't you? Gaara shrugged his shoulders as he picked up his gourd to take upstairs in order to prepare it for easier transport. Consider it karma for trying so hard to kill us 2,000 years ago. XXX. Outside of the Visored's hideout. Naruto stood out front of the warehouse the blonde had come to identify as the housing situation of some of his friends. Ichigo, who was already in Shinigami mode, at his side looking at the building curiously. Well, this is it, Wonderboy. Your first step to becoming more awesome. Naruto said, gesturing to the building. Really? Ichigo asked, tilting his head to the side as if he would see something he was missing with a different angle. I can't sense anything inside. Did you sense anything inside of Urahara's little shop when you first went in there? Naruto asked in response. Ichigo's brow furrowed as he nodded in agreement. Good point. He clapped his hands together, ready to get started. Alright, I'm ready, let's do this. He then found a crumpled little sheet of paper in front of his face. It looked kind of aged, and was that blood he saw on it? Some parts were scratched out and in a certain place his name was written in his place on a part of it. What's this? It's the secret password you need to get in. Naruto said with a massive mischievous grin on his face that Ichigo didn't see because he was reading. Just say that phrase as loud as you possibly can and the doors will open so that you can start training. Naruto took a massive step away from Ichigo. Go ahead. Ichigo raised an eyebrow but did as Naruto asked. My name is Kurosaki Ichigo and I've come to kick some Shinigami reject ass. Please line up single file and I promise it will be quick and exact. He then turned towards Naruto questioningly. What the hell is this, a password or a challenge? Naruto's grin could have split his face. That's exactly what I said when I read it and the thing is, it's a beautiful combination of both. The large door to the warehouse cracked open at that moment, here we go. And a sandal flew out and slapped Naruto in the face. This was followed by Hiyori jumping out and kicking him in the face. Ichigo watched as the tiny blonde girl proceeded to stomp a mudhole in the strongest guy he had ever met repeatedly. Ichigo felt the need to step in as he was sure that it wasn't healthy for someone to eat that much pavement. Hey, he then froze as Hiyori sent a heated glare his way before returning her attention to Naruto. Never mind, I'll just wait. She grabbed the bloody Naruto by his collar and jerked him to eye level. At this point, Naruto recovered and growled angrily at her, and what was that all about you damn pygmy? He was the one that said it, not me. Kick his ass. You made him say it dumbass. Hiyori snapped back at him before the two butted heads and growled at one another. I'm not stupid, that was word for word what you said when we first met. I'm going to have to show you some manners aren't I? How to be a gracious host 101, aka remedial kickass. Anytime you dandelion-headed bastard. Ichigo raised a hand and tried to interject. Hey about my. Shut up and wait, we're busy. Naruto and Hiyori both yelled at Ichigo before returning to fighting with each other, this time each fish hooking the other's mouth. With nothing to do other than watch a 2,000-plus-year-old man act like a child, Ichigo did just that until a blonde man wearing a dress shirt and tie as well as a newsboy cap walked up next to Ichigo and began watching the scene with him. So how long's it been since they started? Ichigo just shook his head, basically saying that he didn't know. It's okay, I know how to stop it. He then spoke loudly so that Hiyori and Naruto would hear him. Man, the way you two fight, I'm sure the sex must be outrageous. And that stopped everything without fail. Naruto, currently on his back, was holding Hiyori in the air at arm's length as she scratched away on his face from above. Naruto and Hiyori both looked over at Shinji before looking back at each other. Naruto grinning up at her with scratch marks that were healing steadily on his face and Hiyori fuming at what was just said out loud. Naruto simply tossed her high into the air, ignoring her screaming, and kipped back up to his feet before catching her and tucking her under his shoulder to walk inside the warehouse, Hiyori cursing Naruto the entire way. Well, Wonderboy, are you coming or what? Ichigo just stared owlishly as Shinji put an arm around his shoulder and led him inside the building as well. Come on in, Ichigo. Naruto's told us all about you and we think we can help you with your problem. Ichigo was too stunned to offer a rebuttal of any kind or to even get the arm off of him. Whoever said that he needed to expand his horizon of friends needed to be taken out back and shot for that shoddy advice. XXX. 15 minutes later, after introductions were made and it was explained what Ichigo's inner hollow really was, as well as the problems that could and would occur if Ichigo didn't undertake the training, Shinji had to say that Ichigo was taking things far better than he assumed the boy would. Though this was mostly because Naruto physically beat it into him beforehand. So let me get this straight. Ichigo said, sitting in a chair in the middle of the warehouse as the rest of the Visoreds lounged around doing what they normally did when Naruto wasn't there or they didn't have pressing issues to attend to. You all have hollows like me except you can use them without worrying about them taking over your body. Love was the first to chime in, looking up from his manga for a moment to give Ichigo the okay sign. You got it, man. With that positive affirmation given, Ichigo continued, you're also saying that if I master it I'll get a massive power boost that can go toe-to-toe with even Naruto one-on-one. No. Naruto said with an amused snort before being contradicted by every other Visored in the room with a resounding yes. Don't give the guy false hope like that. And by the way, I never fight one-on-one. But, Ichigo said, stressing the opposite of his previously stated scenario greatly, if I don't learn how to get my hollow under control, then I'll end up killing everyone that I care about when the thing takes over my body the next time I feel stressed out in a fight. Shinji nodded, glad that Ichigo had gotten the breadth of his situation. Yes, that's right. But don't worry, we have an entire training program mapped out just for you so that we know how to help you out. Hiyori, if you would. Hiyori stood in front of something with a tarp over it and opened her mouth to begin talking when Naruto cut her off from his place in the balcony. Oh, for fuck's sake, just forget the stupid exercise bike. If you make him get on that thing, we're all going to be here for 3 days. He then had said exercise bike thrown all the way across the room at him, tarp and all crashing into his body. You're just begging me to kick your ass, aren't you? Hiyori threatened up at Naruto before she suddenly found the exercise bike flying back through the air at her. She let out a shriek and quickly moved to the side to dodge before looking back up at the balcony and preparing to taunt Naruto's lousy aim until she saw him flying through the air to deliver a tackle that started their fight all over again. Shinji sighed and went over to the poor exercise bike, flipping it right side up. Well, Ichigo, since Naruto told us and showed us that your inner hollow is just as strong as ours, this is the first thing we're going to do for your training. He then turned to the others. Will someone break them up and kick Naruto out so we can get started? Lisa looked up at the fight and watched as at this point Naruto had the Raijin no Ken out and was trading sword strikes with Hiyori's sealed Zanpakuto. I don't feel like getting in between a Jedi and his fight. XXX. Later that afternoon, Naruto's base. So you want to improve upon the destructive powers that you already possess. A stoic Gaara said, complete with his gourd on his back. As was Gaara's way, the gourd was full of sand, but he could also put his books inside when he went to school. If anyone had a problem with it, well, too bad for them. A stare from Gaara could shut up just about anyone after a few seconds of him looking at them without blinking. Yes. Chad said, his super-powered arm already out and ready for action. I learned in the Soul Society that I'm not strong enough to help Ichigo against stronger enemies. I'd like to get stronger so that I can be helpful to him in the future. Gaara couldn't see past the large teen's brown bangs, but he could feel the hard eyes of Chad from where he was standing. Against the strongest of our new enemies, I wouldn't be any help at all right now. I see. Gaara said before walking a distance away from Chad, kneeling down to touch to hard ground before standing back up and facing Chad, the cork of his sand popping off as it started flowing out freely, grinding a hole into the ground. Chad prepared to attack, believing that they were about to spar when Gaara stopped him. We're not going to fight. Instead, I want you to do something else for me. I guarantee that it will help you more than actual battle will at this point. Skeptical at first, Chad decided that he could at least see what Gaara had to offer, since the only idea he had was to fight someone stronger than himself to grow in strength. Alright. I'll do what you ask of me. Gaara nodded and made a ram seal to build his chakra. After a moment the ground began to shake, alarming Chad into a ready stance in case of a battle. Instead of an attack to begin a battle, however, from the ground emerged a figure 3 times Gaara's size, Psycho Zatai Bugyo, Shukaku no Tate, ultimately hard absolute defense, shield of Shukaku. The massive figure was made of tightly packed minerals, arms outstretched as it stood protectively in front of Gaara. Break this with all of your strength. When you are able to do so, you'll have grown significantly in strength. Allowing Gaara time to move out of the way so that he didn't run the risk of taking any part of the attacks, Chad flexed the fingers of his powerful right arm before making a tight fist and unleashing a powerful energy blast directly at Gaara's shield, hitting it directly. As the smoke cleared from the blast, Chad stood with a small sweat going down his face. Okay, this might be harder than I thought, he said as there was barely a scratch on Gaara's shield. XXX. Upon his return to the base, Naruto found Tatsuki going through her katas with her brand new trench knives to get accustomed to them. Naruto took Tatsuki to the back of the office building while Chad was inside working on his attack power by trying to find some way to break through Gaara's strongest sand shield. She wondered why Naruto insisted on having Orihime there as well. Naruto-sensei, why are we out here instead of inside? Won't someone see us if we train out here? Naruto shook his head. There's no one around for miles and you aren't going to be using so much power that others will be able to sense it for this. This exercise is all about control, Tatsuki-chan. You're going to learn the bane of my youth, the tree walking exercise. Naruto demonstrated by walking directly up the side of the building. Tatsuki's eyes lit up for the second time that day. How do I do it? Putting his hands in the ram seal for a demonstration, Naruto explained, build your chakra around your feet. Once you've done that, you're going to run up the wall and go as high as you can. You're going to be running at first so that your momentum can help you get higher. He then dropped from the ground and took her trench knives from her before throwing them up into the wall 5 stories up. Orihime looked with a shocked expression on her face while Tatsuki looked at Naruto as if he had just kicked her puppy. Naruto, what did you do that for? That was so mean, she said in her best lecturing voice. Naruto couldn't help but chuckle at the cute pout on Orihime's face. Whoops, my fingers slipped. He then saw Tatsuki turn her head towards him in a robotic manner with murder in her eyes, its incentive to get the training faster. Naruto defended, jumping up on the wall in case she tried to attack him. You can have them back when you can get up there. It's as simple as that. You can't just give someone a gift and then take the gift away. That's not fair. Tatsuki shouted up at him, waving her arms frantically and angrily before settling down and getting into the ram pose to channel her chakra. Naruto-sensei, you'd better hope I don't get this on the first try because I'm not going for the knives, I'm going to punch you dead in the face. Yeah right. Naruto yelled down challengingly, do you know that it took me a week to learn how to do this? There's no way in hell you're getting this on the first try, I only know one person that ever did that. And then he froze in fear as he began to add some things up. Sakura wound up making it that high on her first try. Sakura was a girl. Tatsuki was a girl. Sakura had a temper. Tatsuki has a temper and a legitimate standing gripe with him. Tatsuki hit hard just like Sakura used to. Tatsuki had a damn good chance of making it that high on her first try and hitting him absurdly hard just like Sakura used to because she was pissed off. Now Naruto wasn't the type of person to wish complete and utter failure onto others, especially his own student, but just this once he needed Tatsuki's growth rate to slow down for a bit. He didn't feel like getting punched off of a wall sitting 50 feet in the air. Not today after fighting tooth and nail with Hiyori for half an hour. Tatsuki's eyes were firmly focused on him as she stopped gathering chakra and sprinted right at the wall amid Orihime cheering her on while Naruto bit his nails nervously. Fuck up. Fuck up. Fuck up. Fuck up. Naruto thought frantically. Unfortunately for Tatsuki, she had way more chakra than Sakura had as a genin. She had more chakra than Sakura ever had, which was what had gotten Naruto's attention in the first place. That made her chakra harder to control akin to Naruto. Thus Naruto was saved by the sheer amount of chakra that Tatsuki had because she made it halfway up before her grip on the wall faded and she fell screaming to the ground, landing flat on her back. Ow! I hate you so much, sensei. Naruto let out a breath of relief and pointed at Tatsuki, and that is why you fail. Because you do not respect your sensei. He then looked at Orihime. That's why I told you to come out here with us. I wish I had someone to heal me when I fell off of the tree I was using to learn how to do this. Tatsuki spoke in a strained voice as she continued to glare up at Naruto. I can't wait until I get good enough to punch you right in the face for everything you do to me. Orihime began healing Tatsuki up. Why does all of your training end up with someone getting hurt, Naruto? She asked the blonde curiously. I don't know, Orihime. Naruto replied, getting down off of the wall as she finished healing Tatsuki. Maybe it's because pain makes you get things faster. Maybe living for 2000 years made me kind of sadistic. Maybe it's just because I'm too lazy to think of something safer to do to train her. Tatsuki got up and quickly tried again, making it just as high up before falling back to the ground again. I see your point though, okay, time to train you too. Orihime blinked in surprise. What? Naruto put his hands on the normally ditzy girl's shoulders while Tatsuki got back up and prepared to run up the wall again. You use your powers to catch her before she hits the ground. It's got to be safer than letting her slam dunk herself in the dirt, right? Taking a moment to actually think about it, Orihime suddenly looked up as it became clear that Tatsuki had slipped and was falling again. Orihime was able to snap into action in a hurry though. Santon Keshun, 3 Sacred Links Shield, I reject. Orihime's spirits formed a clear yellow shield that caught Tatsuki in the air before dispersing, allowing her to land on her feet. Orihime breathed a sigh of relief before she noticed that Naruto still had a hand on her shoulder, just like that. Try to catch her out of the air, but give her a chance to roll through in the air and get herself upright before you do so she can practice landing on her feet. If you want to test yourself, try to catch her closer and closer to the ground. It'll work on the speed you can summon your shield with and your timing. She had been wondering just how Naruto was going to train her ever since Yoruichi told her that if she wanted his help he would be more than happy to. Such a simple exercise, and yet it served a great purpose. Orihime was ecstatic that she could help Tatsuki and train herself at the same time. And this was why she had found it so easy to trust in Naruto, unlike some of the others at first. He was just a good person and apparently something of a problem solver too. Thank you for including me, Naruto. Orihime said aloud, waving to the immortal shinobi as he walked away, turning around to give her one grin before heading back around the front of the building. Orihime. Tatsuki cried out fearfully as she found herself falling back to the ground again. Oh, sorry, Tatsuki. Orihime shouted before quickly catching her friend out of the air. Santon Keshun 3 Sacred Links Shield, I reject. XXX. Urahara shop. Hidan was at least happy to find that Yoruichi had been spending all day there, as at least it meant that he had company. Jinta and Ururu as well as Tessai in the meantime were at the manic mercies of Dondochaka and Peshi, as the two now had someone else to pester. As they sat around the table, Hidan couldn't help but smile serenely as Jinta had smashed a baseball bat off of Pesha's skinny frame out of annoyance. You know, that kid reminds me a lot of myself, full of anger. I wonder how he would receive Jashin-sama's message of death. Don't even try it, Hidan. Yoruichi warned the insane monk of violence as she took a sip of her milk. Besides, this Jashin of yours isn't a god, he's a hollow, I'm telling you. Hidan scoffed, who cares? The powers I had when I was alive came from somewhere in that ritual. I saw him myself. If he's truly a hollow, then I am closer to my lord now than I ever was before. Another reason to be grateful to Uzumaki. Maybe I can lobby for Jashin-sama to spare him, or at least kill him quickly. A dry look came from the former 2nd Division captain. Wow, you're such a gracious, giving man, Hidan. I do what I can for those that need it. Hidan said in reply, ignoring her sarcastic tone. His mood then soured. I can't believe I had to bring the green-haired brat of an Arankar here for a glorified checkup with stupid Urahara. What the fuck do I look like? He's the only one that's qualified to do it, as few qualifications as he really has to do so. Yoruichi said, rather flippant on their resident expert of Arankar, which wasn't saying very much as the rest of them didn't have much of a clue about the race, even the ones of them that actually were Arankar. Hidan drummed his fingers on the table irritably. I know that, but why did I have to be the one to bring her here? I wanted to eat. His stomach then growled. I'm hungrier than hell. That food on the plane ride back completely sucked. Hey, can I turn into an Arankar and eat one of those kids Urahara keeps around here? He saw Yoruichi give him a disbelieving look. What? He has two. He doesn't need both of them. At that moment, Urahara came from the back where his lab was situated, scratching under his bucket hat with a rather bewildered look on his face. Hey everyone, I'm done checking on your little Arankar tagalong, and I think I've found something. Yoruichi raised an eyebrow at how reserved the usually eccentric scientist appeared to be. Is it a good something or a bad something? It had to be a bad something from the way he was acting. Things were going their way far too much for it not to be something bad. Urahara motioned for them to follow him, which they did as he began to speak again. Well, I don't know where to start or where to begin, so I guess I'll just start with the most blatant thing I found. Yeah, I found a giant tattoo of a number 3 on her back. He turned around and saw the wide eyes of Yoruichi and Hidan. Go ahead and ask the question that better be on your minds right now. What in the world, hell is a little girl doing with a tattoo? Yoruichi and Hidan asked respectively before looking and smirking at each other for saying pretty much the exact same thing, nice. With the minor bonding moment between Yoruichi and Hidan at a close, Urahara launched back into his explanation of what he had found with Nell. Yeah, that's what I said when I saw it. The sweet little thing had no idea what I was talking about, so I just started to move along towards measuring her Reiatsu, trying to figure out just when an Arankar grew to be powerful since I had never even heard of a child Arankar before. Hell, I've never really even heard of child hollows period. Hidan at this point was all ears since there was finally something interesting about the little pain in his ass Arankar Nel 2 to pay attention to, so what did you find? If you're bringing it up then you didn't think it was a fucking waste of our time to do it. This is the really interesting part. Urahara said as they eventually made it to the door of his lab, you know the crack in her mask that she has on her head. I thought that was supposed to be there, that it had been like that the entire time. Yeah, it's not. Yoruichi found herself getting angry as the crack corresponded with a scar that was as clear as day on Nell's face, so the crack in the mask and the scar on her face weren't just how she looked. Someone did that to her. The grave nod from Urahara showed her that he felt the exact same way about the idea. Yes, both of those things are long-standing wounds dealt to her at some point years ago, from something that she can't even remember. But that's not all. From the test on her Reiatsu that I did it looks like there's a leak of spiritual energy originating from the crack in her mask. How much? Hidan asked. Urahara then started laughing nervously. I don't know to be quite honest with you. He then turned gravely serious again. I don't know because it was more than my machines could measure. You can't even sense it normally. It's like a silent leak in a canister of odorless gas. She's asleep right now. All of the tests I did were pretty tiring. Yoruichi didn't seem to like the sound of the way things were going as she took on a thinking stance, so what do we do now? Hidan scoffed and turned, walking towards the end of the hall before turning the corner where the sounds of a small scuffle occurred prior to Dondochaka and Peshi being kicked out into the open by the silver-haired Arankar. There. Ask them. They should know something right. I could interrogate them if you want me to. He finished with a dark grin on his face as he extended his pike. Dondochaka and Peshi jumped up to their feet, taking fighting stances with each other back to back, prepared to take on Urahara, Yoruichi, and Hidan. Peshi spoke with the utmost seriousness in warning, what do you guys plan on doing with Nell? Dondochaka followed up, all pretenses of them being goofy and useless disappeared right then and there. We aren't just going to let you exterminate Nell because she's an Arankar that you think is a threat, don't you know? Hidan merely left his pike extended with not a trace of emotion on his face before he stabbed himself in the chest, releasing himself from his Gigai and forcing the two strange-looking Arankar in between him and his Shinigami allies to begin quivering at his Reiatsu before they steadied themselves, still determined to fight. Do you really think that you can beat all three of us? You can feel the difference in our strength and I know that you've been listening well enough to know who these two are and how strong they are. Hidan calmed down. Yoruichi said in an effort to defuse the situation between everyone, you guys can calm down. We don't want to hurt Nell, we just want to know why all of these strange things are happening with her. You can't ask us to put you up if you're hiding some dangerous secret, can you? There was a reason that you didn't want Naruto to send you back to Hawako Mundo and we want to hear it. We need to hear it. Peshi and Dondochaka looked at Yoruichi and then at Hidan as his Reiatsu dropped. He had gotten back inside of his Gigai as a form of a truce. With the tension dropped considerably, Peshi decided that at the very least they could explain their situation. You must understand that we no longer have any allegiance to Aizen, just to Neliel-sama. Urahara narrowed his eyes under the shadow of the brim of his hat, so when you say that you no longer have any allegiance to Aizen that means that you did at one point, correct? Yes. Peshi admitted, there was no need to try and beat around the bush over the matter. Neliel-sama was a member of Aizen's Espada army until several years ago. She was betrayed and attacked by two that were supposed to be our comrades, one who had been an Espada already and another who later managed to become one it seems, Neutra Gilga and Zale Aporo Grants. We owe Naruto a debt of gratitude for disposing of Zale if nothing else once he saw Nell and decided to finish what he had started. Dondochaka decided to speak next. We decided that if this was the way that things were run in Aizen's army, where others could attack comrades just because and suffer no consequences because of it, well we didn't want to be a part of something like that. But by then Nell was already hurt, don't you know? She couldn't remember anything, so we just decided to live as Nell's brothers, to keep her happy and to make sure that nothing else ever happened to her like that again. It's our job as her fraction. Peshi nodded in agreement with his partner's words, we aren't your enemy. We just want to protect Neliel-sama. They all stood in silence, taking all of this in until Hidan spoke up, so with the three on her back, that means that she was ranked third. Is that third from the top or third from the bottom? I'm just curious. How are we supposed to know this stuff if nobody ever tells us? Pesci found no harm in answering the question presented. Well, she was the original Tres Espada, so that means that she was officially recognized as the third strongest Arankar in Aizen's army. Zale said that he was the Octava Espada, so he was second from the very bottom. Yoruichi's eyes widened. Third from the top had to be something incredible since there was still that Harem woman to deal with and they didn't even know which number she was supposed to be. Hidan palmed his face. Great, so the bigwig that Uzumaki knocked off was apparently a total nobody on the real totem pole. Now what the hell do we do? Urahara scratched his chin in thought. Maybe I have some way to help out Nell in there, but I'm not sure. Would she attack me for no good reason if I were to fix her? Pesci and Dondochaka just shrugged as they didn't know. Urahara simply grinned good-naturedly. Oh well, I don't really care too much one way or the other. I'm getting paid for it, and what's science without running a few risks? She really shouldn't just attack you. Pesci tried to explain. Even if fixing her damage brings her memory of her time with Aizen back in her station as an Espada, Neliel-sama was never really one to start a conflict without a good reason. If you don't do anything to her, then she wouldn't try to hurt you. I think she won't. I don't care. Urahara chirped as he opened his door back to his lab, offering the other two the chance to come inside the room. You can come and get her and take her back to Naruto's place. We can continue this on another day. Pesci and Dondochaka then went inside to get their chibified former Espada. Yoruichi let out a sigh as she and Hidan were left in the hallway by themselves with the exception of Ururu and Jinta spying on them at the end of the hallway. Yeah, we really need to set up the trip back to the Saraiti, soon. Hidan shrugged as he leaned against the wall in the hallway. Well, I don't care one way or the other because I'm not going. You and Uzumaki brat can have fun with talking to the people that would kill me if they all knew that I existed in the world of the living. I'll just stay here and run this place while you're both gone. Yoruichi looked at Hidan with a raised eyebrow on her dark-skinned features. You think you're going to be in charge? No way. Gaara's in charge while we're gone. He's got way more leadership qualities than you. What? Hidan shouted, pushing himself off of the wall to protest. I've got seniority in this bitch. What's the sand rat got that I don't? He didn't wait for an answer and began stomping down the hall, scaring the two kids into running out of his way. I can't believe this crap. I'm literally the first recruit in this ass backwards setup. I should be getting all the accolades and sand rat skipped right over me in the pecking order. He said, his voice echoing as he made it to the front of the shop. Give me one good reason that he should run the place. Gaara ran an entire village. Yoruichi said simply, you killed most of yours. Hidan's ranting stopped before the door opened to the entrance of the shop. Yeah. Well, give me another reason. That's right, you can't give me another reason. With that, Hidan slammed the sliding door and left, ranting into the night. Jinta and Ururu walked over to Yoruichi, who had a tick mark on her head at the way Hidan had just belligerently shouted his way out of the house. Miss Yoruichi, Ururu asked meekly, are you upset? Of course she's upset, you idiot. Jinta snapped at Ururu before pointing over at Yoruichi. Didn't you see how crazy Silverbum was acting? I'd be totally pissed if I was her. I'm not mad. Yoruichi said tensely, the tick mark on the side of her head arguing to the contrary. I'm just remembering all of the joys of leadership. And people wonder why I never really missed being a captain.